Good evening, everyone. This is the June 2nd, 2021 Seminole County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. My name is Carissa Lawhon, Chairman to the P&Z Commission. We'll begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This board is a 7-member board appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. Public hearing items acted upon by this board are referred to the Board of County Commissioners for further consideration. A quorum for tonight's meeting has been established. The board members present tonight, starting to my left, are Commissioner and Vice Chairman Stephen Smith, Commissioner Dan Lopez, Commissioner Tim Smith, Commissioner Walt Grundorf, and to my right is Commissioner Bob Turnage. Staff present tonight are Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director, Mary Moskowitz, Planning and Development Manager, Paul Chipock, Deputy County Attorney, Bill White, Professional Engineer, Development Review, Joy Giles, Senior Planner, and Tammy Brushwood, Clerk to the P&Z Board. Tonight's meeting will be conducted as a hybrid in-person and virtual Zoom meeting. If you're here in person and would like to comment on an item, please make sure you fill out a comment card located in the foyer and give it to the clerk. Those joining us by Zoom, please use the raised hand feature on your computer or *9 on your phone. Make sure you unmute yourself when prompted. The order of each item this evening will be as follows. The staff will introduce the item. The applicant will then present the item. The audience participation will occur with those in support to be heard first, followed by those in opposition. We'll begin with in-person participants, followed by those in the Zoom audience. The applicant will be given a chance for rebuttal if needed. Audience speakers should restrict comments to pertinent information pertaining to the item being heard. Audience participants will have 3 minutes to speak, or 6 minutes if representing a formal group. Speakers should begin with providing their name and address for the record. Speakers from the virtual audience will be announced. Please be ready when called upon. The board may ask questions of each speaker. After all speakers have been heard, public comment will be closed. Any items shown, such as videos, presentations, pictures, or maps, must be left with the clerk for the public record. Items shown from electronic devices not in paper form should be sent to the clerk for the record. A motion will be made and then seconded. Board discussion may occur and conclude with a vote by the board. I will call the question to the board, how do you vote, with each member responding either aye, or nay. I will request a roll call vote for any split votes. The first item on the agenda is to accept proof of publication. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, seeing none, motion passes. Next, we have approval of the minutes. Would the board like to make a motion for reconsideration of the May 5th motion and vote where we adopted the incorrect version of the minutes? Did everyone receive that email?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to amend that
Okay.
motion and make a motion to approve the May 5th.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion carries. Let's move on to the minutes. Don't we have a minutes from this past as well, Tammy?
The motion that was made for reconsideration is for the May 5th motion.
Oh, okay, I was thinking that was
Yeah.
April for some reason.
Right.
Okay, very good. Then we'll move on to public hearing items. Item number 1 is the Mobility Fees Land Development Code Amendment, and presented by Bill Wharton.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Chairman. If I may I request not a continuance, be bumped down the agenda item? Our consultant is running a little bit behind.
Sure. Do we need a motion for that, Paul?
Just consensus of the board.
That's fine.
Everyone in agreement?
Yeah.
Then we'll do
Thank
so.
you.
We'll move on then to item number 2, Fire and Rescue Impact Fee Ordinance, presented by Rebecca Hammock.
Good
Good evening. For the record, Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director. Item 2 on the agenda is an ordinance for consideration for the Fire and Rescue Impact Fee Ordinance to request consideration and proposed ordinance amending Chapter 110 of the Seminole County Land Development Code to revise and update the fire and rescue impact fee provisions and rates. We're going to be doing sort of a tag team presentation on this item tonight. I'll be presenting some items, and then we also have our consultant, Negan Camp from Tyndall Oliver, participating via Zoom. So she'll do a PowerPoint presentation related to the study that was done for the impact fees. So as you know, but for the benefit of the audience, impact fees are a revenue mechanism for government to provide adequate capital infrastructure for growth. Impact fees are an accepted method of paying for public improvements that must be constructed to serve new growth. An impact fee must meet a dual rational nexus test to be imposed. A local government must demonstrate the impact fee is proportional and reasonably connected to or has a rational nexus with the need for additional capital facilities and the increased impact fee generated by the new residential or commercial construction. In March 2020, the county entered into a contract with GovRate Inc. in partnership with Tyndall Oliver and Associates to perform impact fee studies for water and wastewater capacity fees, library, and fire impact fees. The studies demonstrated a rational nexus that the impact fee increases are needed to fund necessary capital improvement projects. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Negan Camp, and she'll do a presentation on the study that her consulting firm performed.
She is in, Negan, you just need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Good evening. I'm Negan Camp with Tyndall Oliver. Let me share my screen. Okay. Are you seeing the full screen, or are you seeing 2 slides?
We're seeing 2 slides.
Okay.
There,
So
now we see it.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have a presentation going a little bit over the background and then addressing libraries and then fire rescue. So these 2 studies were completed, the technical studies for these 2 fees were completed in early 90s. And the county is continuing to experience high growth. It's actually one of the larger counties in the state. It ranks 13 out of 67 counties in terms of population. There's an additional 110 new residents are projected through 2045. It ranks 17 in absolute population growth out of 67 again, 25th in population growth rate, annual population growth, and 23rd in residential permitting. So the growth is continuing, so that's obviously resulting in need for additional facilities. And given how outdated the current fees were, like, the county decided to update them. So impact fees by definition are a one-time capital charge to new development, and they cover the cost of new capital facilities and implement capital improvement plans. Their main goal is to maintain the level of service, and they are most needed when there's high growth levels and limited alternative funding. The study is using what we call a consumption-based methodology, which is very common in Florida. It charges new growth based on the value of the infrastructure it's consuming. And fees are calculated at a rate that they cannot generate sufficient revenues to correct existing deficiencies, which is one of the legal requirements. So the basic impact fee formula looks at the value of the infrastructure and what it costs the county to build these. From that, we subtract any future contributions from future development in terms of taxes and so on for the same infrastructure, so that we are not charging twice for the same infrastructure. And then that net cost gets multiplied by the net.
Excuse me, Mary, is there any way to increase the volume at all? We're having a little bit of difficulty hearing.
I think that's going to be SGTV. Yeah, my volume. So Negan, if you can speak more into your microphone so they can.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay. Okay. Okay, is that better if it's measured in terms of population? Are you able to hear me better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So there are several components that I'll go through in each one. In terms of the service areas, libraries are provided countywide, and fire rescue services are provided in unincorporated county as well as 3 of the cities. So if we start with libraries, the county owns 5 libraries, which is almost 100,000 square feet and over 17 acres of land, as well as materials and equipment. Building values were estimated based on any recent construction or upcoming estimates, insurance values of the existing buildings, as well as data from other jurisdictions. And the land values were estimated again based on any recent purchases, upcoming purchases, which was supplemented by vacant land sales and values in the service area.
And
So
just
in the case of
for the board,
libraries,
oh, sorry, Negan, we're considering the libraries as the next item. This item is for the fire impact fees.
Oh, you want me to switch to fire first?
Yes, we're doing the fire impact fees first.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, fire rescue. There are then 20 stations and training facility, public safety building, altogether about 170,000 square feet in the inventory, 45 acres of land. We're also including equipment and vehicles. The building cost for stations is estimated about $465 per square foot, and the land is about $200,000 per acre. And the level of service for capital facilities and impact fee purposes is measured in terms of stations per population. So it's about 15 to 17,000 people is each station is handling. And total capital asset value ends up being about $120 million, and that divided by the service area population gives us about almost $420 per person. And that figure represents what the community contributed, invested into fire infrastructure up to this point. So that's our starting point where as far as charging the new development. There were other revenue sources being used, ad valorem, some sales tax, ambulance fees, and so on. So that generates a credit of about $6 for non-residential land uses. In the case of residential land uses, because there's a large ad valorem usage, we make an adjustment to account for the fact that new homes pay higher property taxes. So that their case on an annual basis is about $8 per resident. So we calculate the credit over a 25-year period over the life of the house or the structure, and that is subtracted from the total cost. So that gives us a net cost of about $284 for residential land uses and $325 per resident for non-residential land uses. So these figures get multiplied by persons per unit at each land use. So these are examples. For example, single family 2,000 square foot home would be about $500. Multifamily is about $330. And then you see some examples of the non-residential land uses. The full fee schedule has almost 40 land uses, and also residential has some categories as well as one category for affordable housing. So this slide provides a comparison to other jurisdictions, nearby jurisdictions. Here we try to show the study date, so you have a sense how old the data is, and then the assessment adoption percentage, which is really a policy decision. So in this case, for example, for single family, the rates are ranging anywhere from $90 to about almost $400. But there were some questions about why the differences, and for example, Brevard County study is a 2000 study and so on. So we also provided some footnotes explaining the differences. And then this chart shows when those differences are adjusted for what, for example, single family rate would look like in those counties. So it would range anywhere from $326 to $590. In some cases, there's a large sales tax allocation, which generates a high credit. Well, Seminole County does not have that. Other revenue sources, in some cases, it's just a newer study. And then this slide provides additional jurisdictions. This is mostly nearby cities, and their rates ranging for single family anywhere from about $400 to $700. And then you also see some examples of non-residential land uses here. So that's the fire portion of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Negan.
Do you want me to stop sharing? You go back to your slides? or-
Yes, please, and then I'll continue with the rest of the fire presentation. So the fire and rescue impact fees have not been updated since 1992, and additional funding is essential to fund capital improvement projects to support growth. Chapter 110, Fire and Rescue Impact Fee of the Land Development Code requires that any proposed increased impact fees be reviewed by the Citizens Advisory Committee. We did establish a Citizens Advisory Committee that was appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and we have had 3 meetings of that committee. And with regard to the fire impact fees, some of the feedback that we've received from them was that they thought the proposed impact fee rate for drive-through fast food restaurants was perhaps too high. And the other comment that we did get was there is support to raising the fire impact fee to help fund the infrastructure in the capital facilities that we need, especially in regards to ladder trucks and ladder companies, since we're getting so much multifamily development and we've got high-rise office buildings, and so they do feel that we need to be able to adequately fund that infrastructure that we need. And with regard to the comment about the fast food drive-through restaurant. It was hard to say. Negan, I don't know if you want to address that and how that's calculated in the study. It is based on the density and the number of people that are going to the restaurant within, and because there's so much population there within a certain amount of time, that's what is generating the higher impact fee. But perhaps, Negan, you might be able to explain that better than I can.
Yes, no. So the rates that we show in our tables are on a per 1,000 square foot for all of the land uses. And in the case of fast food, they are smaller structures, but they have a lot of traffic and a lot of people going through. So there's a lot of density per 1,000 square foot compared to, say, light industrial, which are large buildings with fewer people. So on a per 1,000 square foot, their density is lower. So that's the primary driving factor. Again, the link, as far as demand goes, the link is that the density indicates a potential need to have the capital facilities available.
Okay. The proposed not-to-exceed impact fee rates schedules were published in the Orlando Sentinel on March 28th, 2021, in anticipation of a June 29th, 2021 effective date. The proposed ordinance amends Chapter 110 Fire and Rescue Impact Fee of the Land Development Code to revise and update the fire and rescue impact fees provisions, and revises and updates the fire and rescue impact fee rates. The proposed ordinance also offers a separate rate for affordable housing and a complete waiver of fire and rescue impact fees for affordable housing under certain circumstances. So the proposed rates do include a separate land use category for affordable housing. It would have to meet the definition of affordable housing and would require a minimum of a 30-year affordability period to be able to qualify for that separate rate. We've also included a provision to allow a complete waiver of impact fees under certain circumstances. Those two circumstances would be if it was land owned and being developed by a community land trust, or an affordable housing project that meets the definition of affordable housing and has a minimum affordability period of 50 years. An associated resolution is also being proposed for consideration by the Board of County Commissioners. It does not require action by the Planning and Zoning Commission, but the resolution would establish a vesting process in the Seminole County Administrative Code. It states that vesting will be considered for properties with a contract in existence as of June 22nd, 2021, for the sale or development of the property that includes impact fees, and demonstrates the new impact fee would result in an immediate diminishment in the value of the subject contract. And with that, staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 110 of the Seminole County Land Development Code to revise and update the fire and rescue impact fee provisions and to revise and update the fire and rescue impact fee rates. And I'm available for any questions, as well as Negan from Tyndall Oliver, and I believe Chief Droz is here also to answer any questions.
Okay, questions of staff?
Could you address again the increased fee for the fast food drive-through? Why the higher rate per square foot?
Sure. Negan, do you mind explaining that again, how it's calculated and why it results in such a higher rate?
Yes, it's so the rate is per 1,000 square foot, and fast food restaurants tend to have a lot of people going through them, and they have small square footage. They are maybe 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. So those people divided by a small square footage generates a high density per square foot.
So how does people driving to the restaurant require fire rescue at 3 times the rate of other buildings?
Well, it's a lot of medical calls. I mean, most of what they do is medical, and the density of people is considered to be a link to a potential need for the service. And the other part of it is, this is again for capital facilities. So the fire stations are built in a way that they can reach the population within a certain time frame. So this is not so much like an operational fee like the assessment. So, the more density you have, there's going to be a need that there's the availability of the capital facilities where they can get there within a certain time frame.
I'm trying to understand. I understand the higher volume, but they're not all there. At one point in time, they may only be 10 customers. They get their food and they leave. I could see having a much higher kitchen, larger kitchen, grease, potential for fire, then that could serve a much larger restaurant. But I don't understand the high traffic count requiring a higher impact fee.
Well,
And I'm not being critical, I want to understand.
Right.
It's
More of their calls, and the chief can talk to that too, but it's probably 80+% of their calls are medical. They are not really fire related. And you have more people there, there's a higher likelihood that there will be a need for a medical assistance as well as fire. But
So, and I think it's the number of people visiting the location within a day, whereas a fast food restaurant is going to have much more patronage during a day than, say, an industrial warehouse or a normal retail, clothing store, for example. So I think that's why it also requires the higher impact fee rate, because there's more of a likelihood of getting, a medical call or a needed call because that many more people are going to that location.
And that's not something that's based on speculation. That's something based on data, right?
Right, Negan, that's an accepted methodology.
correct, yeah, exactly. The population base is what we call a functional population, which looks at presence of people at each land use throughout the 24-hour period, is a very well established and very common methodology.
Okay, thank you.
And then also, I did want to share the definition of affordable housing that we did include within the proposed ordinance. Since we are creating that separate land use category, I wanted to make the commission aware of that. And if that's okay, I can read that into the record. So it's a dwelling unit for which monthly rents or monthly mortgages payments, including taxes, insurance, and utilities, do not exceed 30% of that amount, which represents the percentage of the median adjusted gross annual income for the households or persons indicated in Section 420.0004 Florida statutes at 80% or less of the median annual adjusted gross income for the household within Seminole County. The period of affordability shall be a minimum of 30 years as evidenced by a restrictive covenant or similar document running with the land.
Thank you. Other questions of staff?
Yeah, I do. Do you have any idea what the expansion as far as stations go? How many stations are planned in the future?
I'll defer to Chief Droz to answer that
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Otto Droz, Fire Chief, for the record. We have, so there's a couple of things that are happening within fire rescue. Because we have not increased the impact fees since, I believe, 1992, there's been a buildup of need within the community. In fact, the last time we built a station was Station 29, and it had been 17 years since we built a new facility within Seminole County since that time. Now what we're looking at is a lineup of several stations that are planned for within the next 10 years. So the first one that will go in will be Station 39, which is in the International Drive area, where we have a lot of development. As you all probably know, there's about 7,000 units, and we have the mid to high-rise units that are going out there. So that'll be the first station that goes in. Then in the Winter Springs area, we have Station 28. Abutting near Longwood, we have Station 19. And then the other thing that impact fees do, while you can't replace existing infrastructure, when you have need within the community that goes above and beyond what the existing infrastructure provides, you can add to that infrastructure. So for instance, as you go through Winter Springs and you see the mid-rises that are going up there, the 3 to 4 to 5 story buildings, we have the need for the aerial apparatus within those areas, and the impact fees can be used for that as well. So not only do we have the stations, we have the equipment to service the communities. And with Seminole County growing in density every year, I think being the third most dense population, when we plan our stations, it's not for necessarily the calls that we run, but the population densities that reside within area that we may have to run. Because what you don't want is you don't want an infrastructure that's being taxed heavily and you have low unit availability. So what I mean by that is when we get the first call for service and one station's first due, what we want is redundancy in the system in order to provide for that second emergency that comes in because of the population density within any given area. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you very much. What, just roughly, what does a ladder truck cost? $1 million, $1.5 million?
They're running in the $1.5 million area, and then we have one that we put in Station 34 recently to cover that area that we spoke about, that it's a smaller version of an aerial apparatus. It does have aerial capability, and that one was about $950,000.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Other questions? Okay. Is there any member of the audience who'd like to speak in favor or opposition to this item? I don't think I have any cards. Anybody on Zoom, Mary?
No one on Zoom.
Is that on fire?
A couple coming your way.
For this item, Tammy?
Okay.
In that case, we'll close public comments and go to board discussion or a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 110 of the Seminole County Land Development Code to revise and update the fire and rescue impact fee provisions and to revise and update the fire and rescue impact fee rates.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then the motion carries. Move on to the next item, Library Impact Fee Ordinance, presented also by Rebecca Hammock.
Good evening again. For the record, Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director. Item 3, Library Impact Fee Ordinance, is a request for consideration of a proposed ordinance amending Chapter 115 of the Seminole County Land Development Code to revise and update the library impact fee provisions and rates. Again, we did contract with Tyndall Oliver to perform a study and do the rational nexus study for the update to the library impact fees. And so I will, at this point, turn it over to Negan so that she can go through the study and the results of the study for the library impact fees.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Megan Camp with Tyndall Oliver. In terms of the library facilities, the county has 5 libraries with about 98,000 square feet and 17 acres of land. We also include the library materials and equipment in the inventory. The building value for libraries is estimated at $300 per square foot, and the land is about $125,000 per acre. Library level of service for buildings is measured in terms of square feet per population, materials as well, of items per population, and the computers as well. So total asset value for libraries is about $74 million, and that divided by the service area population gives us about $150 per resident. And again, this represents the investment the community has made into library infrastructure up to this point. There was some expenditures from other revenue sources like general fund in the past, so that resulted in a small credit. And when that is subtracted from the cost, net cost per resident ends up being about $150. Library fee, impact fees are charged only to residential land uses, so this is the full schedule. And you can see we have, so mid-sized single-family home is about almost $400. Multifamily is about $270. And then you can see the affordable housing category here. All of the fee schedules right now have that category included. This chart provides a comparison to other jurisdictions. So we really started with all the neighboring jurisdictions, but not all of them have library impact fees because some of them have MSTUs and so on. But anyway, in this chart, again, you see the study date as well as the adoption percentage, and these rates range anywhere from $65 to $340. And again, we were asked to look into it a little bit more, and when we adjust for study dates or the high credits because availability of sales tax or MSTU, the fee schedule looks more like this. So for example, Charlotte County has allocated a large chunk of infrastructure sales tax revenues, which result in a 50% credit, whereas in Seminole County, there's very little other revenues being allocated to libraries, so that kind of thing. And so that when adjusted for those kind of differences, the other jurisdictions' rates for mid-sized single families range from $300 to about $485. And I think, yes, that's summary of the study for libraries. Back over to Rebecca.
So just like the fire impact fees, the library impact fees have also not been updated since the early 90s. And additional funding is needed to purchase new materials on an annual basis and for library facility improvements and expansion to support growth. The proposed not to exceed impact fee rate schedule was also published in the Orlando Sentinel on March 28th, 2021 in anticipation of a June 29th, 2021 effective date. We have had 2 workshops so far with the Board of County Commissioners on the impact fees. We had one on April 13th, and then we had another one on May 18th, and we are also going to have a 3rd workshop on June 8th. 2 of the workshops are to comply with the pending legislation of House Bill 337 for impact fees that require you to have 2 publicly noticed workshops to demonstrate that there are extraordinary circumstances necessitating the need to increase the impact fees beyond 50%. The proposed legislation requires you to phase in the impact fees if you increase them up to 50%. If you're increasing them 25%, it requires you to phase them in over 2 years. If you're increasing them more than 50%, then it requires you to phase it over 4 years. However, if you demonstrate that there are extraordinary circumstances that necessitate the need to exceed those percentage limitations, then you can move forward with an ordinance, as long as your study has also been done within the past year and demonstrates the need and the rational nexus. So the proposed library impact fee rates are only charged for new residential development. So these are only charged for multifamily, single-family residential. And they are applied on a countywide basis except for the city of Altamont Springs, who has their own library impact fee. The proposed ordinance also proposes a separate rate for affordable housing, so it has the same language as the proposed fire impact fee, so there will be a separate land use category for affordable housing, and it will also contain the provisions for that complete waiver under those certain circumstances. So, and it also has an associated resolution for vesting that will be that will go to the Board of County Commissioners for consideration. So if somebody can demonstrate that there would be an impact on their contract, they can apply for vesting and be charged the old rate. And so with that, staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 115 of the Seminole County Land Development Code to revise and update the library impact fee provisions and revise and update the library impact fee rates. And I'm available to answer any questions. Negan's available to answer any questions, and we also have the Director of Leisure Services here to answer any questions. The library system is under the Leisure Services Department.
Thank you, Rebecca. I have a couple of questions with regard to the presentation we saw, the slides.
Sure.
Why are we comparing with counties like Palm Beach and Charlotte rather than surrounding counties like we did for fire?
So Negan, I don't know if you're able to, if you don't mind sharing that slide and addressing that question. I know you also had some local comparisons as well.
Right. Okay. So we started with the surrounding counties, but because most of the surrounding counties did not have a library impact fee, then we added some other jurisdictions that recently updated or maybe within the maybe next tier of look as far as proximity. So again, as I mentioned, I believe Osceola and Orange counties has the MSTU, so they are funding it that way. So they don't have a library impact fee. So that was the reason why we went to the other counties.
Okay.
Just so we don't have only one comparison kind of thing.
And why do we suppose that the usage of a library is so much higher from a single-family home than a multifamily or mobile home? It looks like when we set the fees before, we didn't think that was true.
So the library fees, again, are availability based. So we are charging the units for the availability, and single-family homes have more residents per unit than multifamily. That's the driving factor. It's more refined and it's a little bit more equitable distribution, but again, there is no legal requirement to go one way or the other. So it could be combined if needed. It just reflects that single-family homes on average have more people, so there's likely to be, these facilities are likely to be used at a heavier level by the single-family homes.
Okay. What other questions do we have, guys? I'm the only one who has questions about library?
Of course, we all love libraries, and this is not by itself a lot of money, but I figure the average single-family home is paying over 15 individual impact fees, over $15,000, $16,000 at present, and we're already looking at increasing. Every impact fee we've looked at is 400, 500% increase over what we've had. So it adds up, and I'm really concerned about home ownership in Seminole County, which is they're getting more and more expensive. Things that are outside our ability, such as lumber, is quadrupling. Well, you know better than I do.
Yeah.
And the cost, everything keeps adding to the cost of housing. I'm not really hearing from the residents because they're already there. It's kind of like, I've got mine, I don't really want anybody else moving in. But every impact fee we come up with makes sense, sounds great, we love libraries, but it makes it more difficult for people to buy housing, which puts them in renting, which housing seems to be the number one thing that lets people build assets, build opportunities that they can go after when times are down. rather than being a rental with no capital already appreciated. So I guess I'm not against it, but I don't see why it's almost, I forget the word you use. It's almost an emergency. You have to say, we can't phase it in because we need it now. Why can't we just phase this in?
So through the studies themselves, and then based on the capital needs of the various departments to support growth, the funding is needed currently to fund those capital improvement plans. While this will potentially will increase the cost to develop in the county through increased impact fees. Ultimately, if we don't have growth pay for itself, that cost will be passed on to the taxpayers. And right now, the taxpayers are subsidizing the cost of growth because our impact fees haven't been increased for so long. And yes, we recognize that it is a large increase. It's a big jump from 1992 because it's been so long since we've done that. But in comparison to the other jurisdictions, the rates appear to be reasonable or in line with the other Central Florida jurisdictions.
And those that have them at all.
So
think is
how
what they
are
said.
they funding it now?
So through improvements, and then just through other tax sources, through other revenue sources.
So they're having to pull revenue from other sources to pay for it?
Correct.
It's getting paid for one way or the other?
So currently, Chief Droz provided an example where currently the impact fees are paying for 13% of the capital needs, but with the increase in the impact fees, it would be able to pay for 26% of the fire capital needs.
I wonder if we're giving enough attention to the affordable housing category. I mean, you're giving a discount, but it's not even half it's not even 50% of a discount. And I know, shouldn't we be looking at ways to try to entice development so that they create some type of affordable housing within Seminole County? Affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever you want to call it. It's nice that you've developed a category, but I'm not sure if it's going deep enough.
So one of the topics of conversation at the next work session with the board is whether they want to broaden that definition of affordable housing to include workforce housing, because that is also one of the recommendations of the Citizens Advisory Committee to make that consideration. Of course, there are revenue implications to doing that. However, it may be minimal. It's estimated that maybe 5% of total units are for affordable housing. If you broaden the definition, you may increase it to 10 or 15%. So by the Florida statutes does allow you to waive impact fees completely for affordable housing, but of course, if you do that, you are not receiving that revenue for those capital needs. And regardless, there is an impact by affordable housing, and we're trying to incentivize affordable housing by lessening or reducing the rate. However, they likely do not provide any less of an impact. And we're providing that lower rate based on the fact that the Florida statutes allows us to do that.
Any idea what percentage of development that's taking place will currently fall within the category of affordable housing?
In Seminole County, very little.
Right?
Very small.
Not much at all.
Yeah, and we have an average of 600 homeless at any one time in Seminole County. So I appreciate your comment. I've worked a lot with the homeless in Seminole County.
Okay. I don't think I have any comment cards. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in favor or in opposition to this item? Oh, Mary, anyone online?
No raised hands. Oh, wait, I do have.
Good catch.
You would need to, Joe Humphreys, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just a couple of quick points. I'm supportive of pretty much of what the staff has presented. There's some minor modifications that I might want to kind of tweak a little bit, but I think generally speaking, they've put in a tremendous amount of effort on this. I think it's, as it's been mentioned, it's long overdue. As somebody that was involved in the real estate business for many, many years, and developed a business, an investor in the real estate business, I hear the concerns about affordable housing. The problem with affordable housing is we keep talking about that, but what is that? Okay, affordable housing in Seminole County is different than affordable housing in Orange County versus affordable housing in Silicon Valley or, upstate New York. So that's something that I keep hearing batted about constantly, but I've yet to hear anybody to give a specific definition of that in this particular county where we're dealing with. That's something that needs to be addressed. As far as what the impacts are, again, unfortunately, it doesn't matter, how many people are living in the house or multifamily home, whatever it happens to be, income level or whatever. Impact is by human impact. Doesn't matter, again, unfortunately, like it or not, what your income stream is, what your job is. If I use the library doesn't, when I check out books, it doesn't know, if I'm making $1 million a year or $10,000 a year, the impact is still the same. As far as somebody who's been in the development business, I can tell you for a fact that this is long overdue. And yes, the concern about who's paying, at the end of the day, there's that old adage about you pay me now, you pay me later. There's a cost associated to all of this stuff, whether it's roads, water, utilities, all of the above. And Seminole County needs to decide what it wants to be long-term when it grows up. What do we want to be like as a county? So those are the things that I would ask. But again, I support the efforts and the recommendations of the staff so far, and I would urge you to support them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mary, anyone else?
No other raised hands.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment. Board question?
Madam Chair, I believe there's someone in the audience too.
Oh, okay. Sure, come on up, ma'am.
Where do I speak into? Okay.
Introduce yourself, give your name and address for the record, and your card to Tammy there, so we have it.
And what was the last thing?
Your speaker card to...
Right, okay, which has nothing written on it right now. But Linda Barker, 3405 South Mellonville Avenue, Sanford, Florida. In regards to what the last gentleman mentioned, I happen to agree 150% in relation to, I think there should be a fee per unit and not based on how big or how small a unit is, be it a single family. Because to me, fees, fire protection, should be equally shared, and I really don't think people should be penalized according to their square footage. That's just, and I think that's kind of sort of what he was alluding to, because you could have one person in a single-family home, or you could have 10. You could have 10 people in a multifamily, who knows? That's just my comment, and I've often felt that our tax revenue should be more equally shared in terms of number of units, as opposed to making one person pay $10,000 more than the person next door. So, and I'll go ahead and fill this out and give this to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we'll close public comment and move on to board discussion or a motion.
I would like to see it phased in, but if I'm the only one, I don't want to be the Grinch.
I can agree with that. I mean, I see the reason for doing
Yeah.
that. I don't see the urgency that you're talking about.
Yeah, fire rescue, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no
Library.
problem with 300% increase in fire rescue impact, but 350% increase in library impact fee right now. It's like, yeah, we need libraries, but we don't need a 350% increase.
I don't know, I think everything's online anymore.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, really.
You got to consider when the last time it was done. You're paying the piper because we've done nothing for
30 years.
29 years.
Yeah.
So you want to do the math.
Yeah.
I struggle with that.
Yeah, I do too, but then again, it's not the next person who buys the house. It's not their fault that the government hasn't been doing their job correctly.
So is somebody making a motion? Either of you?
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Okay,
I don't,
go ahead.
So motion to adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 115 of Seminole County Land Development Code to revise and update the library impact fee provisions and to revise and update the library impact fee rates.
Okay, we have a motion?
Second.
And a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, seeing none, the motion passes. Our next item is the water and wastewater capacity fee resolution, administrative code amendment. This is for informational purposes only, and no board action is required. Rebecca, do you have a presentation on this?
Good evening again, Rebecca Hammack, Development Services Director for the record. We are not going to provide a presentation. I just wanted to let you know that if we did provide it for your information, just so you have a holistic look at the impact fees that are being proposed. This is being done by resolution, so it just requires action by the Board of County Commissioners. We do have the Director of Environmental Services, Terry McHugh, here, and we also have our consultant, Brian Mance, from GovRate Inc. in Zoom, just in case there were any questions on the proposed water and sewer capacity fee increases.
Any questions of staff? You don't? Okay. Then we'll move on. Item number 5 is the special exceptions amendment to the Land Development Code. Staff is requesting a continuance to a date uncertain on this item. Can we get a motion on that, if nobody has any objections?
I'll make a motion to continue it.
Second.
I'll second. Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that item will be postponed. We'll move to item number 6, the Palmetto Point rezone, presented.
Chair?
Do you want to go back to
Yes.
one?
Do you want to go back to number 1? We do have the consultant here for...
Okay, I was going to do it at the end, but we can take them out of order that way. We'll move to item number 1, Mobility Fees Land Development Code Amendment, presented by Bill Wharton.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Bill Wharton, Transportation Planning Manager with Engineering Division. Thank you for working with us on this. If I may, just kind of give a little bit of background. I know we have some new members on board, and we'll just kind of give you the abbreviated presentation for this. I also have Bill Oliver here, who can talk more about the methodology and how the fees themselves will come in and give you an idea how that works out. Along with the other impact fees, the road impact fees, again, have not been increased for quite some time. So we're all kind of in the same boat there since late 1995. When Commissioner Horan was still here, he requested staff to look into the feasibility of going from the road impact fees that we currently have now, moving on to the mobility fees. Staff did that, and then the board directed staff to go ahead and do the study for the mobility fees and bring that back to them, and that's kind of about where we are now. And really, not a big difference between a road impact fee and a mobility fee. Mobility fee gives the jurisdiction a little bit more leeway on what they spend the money on. Not a whole lot. You still have to spend it on capacity increasing capital improvement projects, but along with roadways, now you can spend that on sidewalks and the multi-purpose trails as well, with some restrictions on those areas. The mobility fee itself is based on the 2040 transportation plan that the county approved a couple of years ago. And this also addresses the roadways, trails, and the sidewalks. And just to back up a bit, the mobility fee themselves, the mobility fee for this is really a small slice of the entire pie of what the projects themselves cost, and Bill can address that as well. Along with this, there are 3 districts that we've created throughout the county. The core district is generally bounded by Interstate 4 and 1792. This is where you have your shorter trip links because you have a lot of your facilities, live, work, play, those type of things all in the same area. You have your transit, you have Sunrail running through there. The next is the suburb, and you have that east of 1792 and west of I-4. Again, the fees here are a little bit higher because your travel distances from the suburb into the core area where the majority of your facilities are is a little bit longer travel. The rural area is our approved east rural area over on the east side of the county, Again, for the most part, the fees are highest out there, again, because of the travel length. And again, Bill Oliver can explain that a little better as well. Partway through this, we did a revision to the population and housing estimates we had. When the other impact fees came along, it was directed by the county manager that just so across the board, all the impact fees, mobility fee included, use the same methodology and the population estimates. So we've done that. As you know, there's been, we had letters from both the city of Oviedo and city of Sanford who felt like the development in their downtown areas should be accommodated in the core fees as well. So we looked at that. We did adjust the ordinance to allow for the cities to either do their own study to be able to come up with what could be their core fees, or they could do a complete mobility fee themselves that we have done with the city of Altamont Springs. The city of Sanford, I spoke to them about a week or so ago. They, I think, are looking more towards the mobility fee, but they're not prepared to move forward with that right now. The city of Oviedo has brought a consultant on board, and they are going to move forward with their own mobility fee. And I believe one of the consultants is here, and they can address that with you as well. You also received a letter today from the law firm Lowndes addressing the mobility fees as well. The gentleman is here, and he'll be able to address his concerns. The points that he points out, I think that from the county's viewpoint, those are issues that we can address, and I don't think that would affect the way that we move forward with the mobility fee. Again, we're providing 3 different rate schedules to the Board of County Commissioners so they can look at them and decide which one that they would prefer to go with. Those are included in your packet. And again, we would be recommending alternative number 3 for that. There are changes to the ordinance over the past several months. Those are listed out in your agenda packet. The affordable housing definition is one of those that are included in there. Again, our effective date is the same as the other impact fees. They were noticed in the newspaper March 28th and go into effect on June 29th as well. Again, there are 3 resolutions that are included. Rebecca Hammock spoke about a couple of those, the vested rights resolution. The resolutions this board does not need to make any action on. These will go to the Board of County Commissioners, but wanted to supply those so you get, again, the full picture. So there's a resolution on the vested rights. There's a resolution on the time of payment of fees. And then a resolution really just changes the name from Road Impact Fees, Citizen Advisory Committee to Mobility Fees. And with that, it's kind of give you a little bit of background on it. I'll ask Bill Oliver to come up, our consultant, who can give you a little bit more in-depth on the methodology and how we got to the fees that we got to.
And Mary, if you could fire up the fees, and if I cough, I'm sorry, it's not COVID, it's called grandchildren sharing their daycare stuff with us. There we go. And skip forward a couple of slides. There, let's stop there. So yeah, Bill asked me to focus on the methodology that's used to develop the mobility fee. Similar to other impact fees that you've heard about tonight, we call it a consumption-based approach, where we basically measure how much infrastructure mobility system capacity a unit of development consumes. We associate with that a value, then we look at what other revenues either that use itself generates or other revenues that are in place, their ability to fund those needs, and then the shortfall that might exist is where we set the impact fees or the mobility fees to address. So the consumption or as you can summarize here, the fee is equal to the amount of travel generated times the cost of that capacity minus the credits. And in this fee, the travel generated is computed by looking at the number of trips that are generated, the length of those trips, and in some cases, some land uses capture travel from the adjacent street as an incidental trip. We don't charge for that, like a gasoline station. You don't just, you rarely make a round trip to a gas station and back home. Usually you stop and buy gas on your way to somewhere else. So that type of a trip would be one of those captured trips. And we divide that by 2 under the philosophy that the land uses at each end of the trip share the responsibility for generating that trip. So that's why that divide by 2 parameter is there. The cost of the capacity, we look at several considerations. One is, what is the strategy of your adopted transportation plan? Is it heavily road-oriented? Does it involve public transportation, bicycle facilities, sidewalks, and so forth? And so the mix of those facilities that we use can vary by district of the community, and so we develop the appropriate mix of those costs by fee district. And that mix is established in your transportation plan. So that was kind of a given as we came into this study, the 2040 transportation plan that was adopted back in 2017, 2018. The quality of service is also a variable that works into that cost. If you want a very good, low congestion type of mobility system, it's more expensive than if you're willing to accept congestion and less mobility capability by district. And your current transportation plan does clearly provide for different degrees of congestion in different areas of your county, and we'll take a look at that in a second. The credits that we apply against the cost of infrastructure needed involve both revenues that the land use itself generates, what I call self-credits, as those trips get made to and from various places. You're burning gasoline, you're generating sales tax, and so to some extent those revenues are credited back. The other component is any other addressing the ability of your revenue program to fund the need, and I'll summarize that for you in a second as well. Next slide, please. So as Bill Wharton indicated, the county, the proposed fee program divides the county into, I'll call it 4 districts. There's a suburban district on the west side of the core district, west of I-4. There's the core district, which basically is from I-4 to 1792, Sunrail corridor, kind of down the central portion of that. This eastern suburban area, east of 1792, and then your rural district, which is established in your county charter, your rural protection area. Next slide. Oh, and these districts were, the rural district boundary was established by the charter, the countywide referendum that occurred. And then the core district boundaries are established in your transportation element as an enhanced transit area. So that area is more heavily served by transit. We're willing to accept more congestion in that area. Excuse me. And then the rural district is the rural district is less dense. You have longer trips. You want a higher quality of service in that area so you can get to where you're going. And those are clearly indicated in your transportation plan. Next slide. So the way the fee for a specific land use is set up, and I've kind of set up an example here of a trip that might start out in your rural district and drive into a job site, say, in your core district. So the fee for the rural land use is set up so that it reflects the proportion of travel that occurs within each district. For example, on this trip, 26% of the trip length occurs in the rural district. So we would apply the rural unit cost, the rural modal strategy, and the rural quality of service goal for that 26% of the trip length. In the suburban district, in this example, 57% of the trip length would be in your suburban district. So for 57% of that fee rate, we would apply the suburban quality of service, the suburban unit costs, to derive that part of the fee. And then the last 17% being in the core district, that portion of the cost would reflect the core district quality of service goals and so forth. So, and even that mix of of trip lengths varies by the trip length associated with the land use itself. A fast food restaurant has a very short trip length. Residential land uses tend to have longer trip lengths on average. So this would be a good example probably of a residential land use. If there was a fast food restaurant in the core district, very little of its travel would go to the suburban district. So virtually 99% of the fee for the fast food restaurant would be based on that core district, the core district characteristics. So, so we've tailored the fees to reflect the district they're in, the quality of service goals, the trip lengths, and so forth. Okay, Mary? This slide is my favorite, I guess, in a way. There's a lot of information there, but it kind of fits together to kind of give you the big picture on how we finally arrive at the fees. The box on the upper left is what I call your goals and needed revenues portion of the program. You can see there's 4 columns, the total column, the rural district column, the suburban district column, and a core district column. And in the column, we start out with how much travel is occurring in that district, what the growth rate is, and how much travel we expect to see of growth every year. The capacity addition ratio is a parameter that sets what your quality of service goals are for the future. In a sense, it sets you on a trajectory. So if we're expecting, for example, and I can't see the numbers, if we're expecting about, say, 2,000 person miles of travel of growth every year, and our goal is to construct 1.33 person miles of capacity every year to provide a good quality of service in that rural district, then that says here's how much capacity we need to build each year. We then look at how much it costs to build that person mile of capacity to arrive at how much revenue we need every year to fund the program. So we do that for each of the 3 districts, add it up, and in this particular case, I think I see the number $51 million countywide is needed each year to fund your mobility plan. Then in the green box, we look at the revenues that are available to fund that $51 million. Now, in this case, that $51 million includes state revenues, so don't have a heart attack quite yet. And you can see then we look in the green box at each source of revenue that comes to play on the revenues. The state gasoline tax funds. County funding is primarily out of your sales tax program. And so those sources, your existing sources of revenue, are generated both by growth and they'll be generated by people who are already here, which is what I call the base, your base population and your growth population. So each column there summarizes how much the base would be funding of the program and how much growth would be funding of the mobility program. And you can see that the sales taxes and the state gas taxes, the revenue program that's in place, your sales tax fund about, is that about 75%? I believe 17%, maybe 80% of your program. Oh, here. Yeah, it's right behind me. 15, yeah, okay, so it's not, actually it funds about 86% of your program. So then we're looking for the mobility fees to round out the balance of the program, or about 14% of the program. So the yellow box with the 21.7% basically relates back to what portion of the full cost of the infrastructure needed by each land use, you need to charge. In other words, going through the calculations that I walked you through on the earlier slide, you may find that a single-family home should be paying $35,000. However, because you have gas taxes, a sales tax program, other revenues coming to help fund those needs, you don't need to charge $35,000. We only need to charge about 21.7% of the full fee in order to meet your goals. And so that's how we come back in and set the fees that are derived in that purple box, the mobility fee examples. So that was, I think, essentially, so that's kind of the methodology we follow as we develop the fee program. So if you have questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Okay, go ahead, questions of staff.
I have a question. If you're basing this on travel, how do you establish 4 different rates for a single-family dwelling? How did you decide that one dwelling has 3 times more travel than another dwelling?
Are you talking about the differences between the core district, suburban district, and...
I'm just looking at rural right now. So we have a single-family affordable house, which
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, is $3,600, and I'm looking at a single-family home at 2,500 square foot at $9,700.
The National Household Travel Survey basically does research in terms of how much travel is generated by homes of different sizes.
Really?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
And in fact, that's where that data comes from.
Okay.
Smaller homes, smaller homes, less people, less travel. Bigger homes, more affluence, more travel.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lopez?
Actually, on the same page, on the same table, I was focusing on the categories that were being charged the most, like the medical office, the convenience retail, the restaurant for sitting down, gasoline station, and I'm thinking, well, and I understand the reasoning behind it, that these are institutions that require or that are going to bring in higher traffic, but charging these higher fees might deter the building of some of these establishments. And speaking as somebody that grew up in the woods of New Jersey, I grew up in a rural area. I was half an hour from everything, and we were begging for things to be built in there. And ultimately, what happens? You end up having to travel to more populated areas to visit these types of establishments, creating more congestion in more heavily populated areas. Wouldn't it make some sense to try to entice building of some of these establishments?
Some counties have done that. Seminole County, at least the direction we've gotten so far from the Board of County Commissioners, is not terribly interested in doing that. One of the key issues there is that and if you wanted, Pasco County, for example, they basically, they say incentivize, or they basically subsidize the mobility fees. There's a, the U.S. Constitution has a amendment that requires equal protection of individuals in the nation. And so if you're going to charge a house a mobility fee, then you have to charge everybody a mobility fee in appropriate proportions or in appropriate relationships. So if you decide that you don't want to charge a particular land use fee, and it has been done, state law says you can do this, to protect yourself on that equal protection issue, the government has to step in effect, and fund that subsidy on behalf of that land use. And so at this stage, it was a consideration, it was brought up, but not latched onto.
But it doesn't have to be at these rates or set by district like this, right? I mean, that the amendment to the Constitution doesn't say that.
Well, in a sense, it still does, because if there are clear differences in the characteristics, in the quality of service you intend to provide for an area, or if a geographic area does have what I would call technically justifiable reasons, longer trip lengths, better quality of service, different costs, different modal strategies, then it is appropriate to assess the appropriate cost to the appropriate district.
Okay, other questions of staff?
I believe Loud's pointed out, the data that you're using for all this is from 2017?
It's actually a couple of different sources. We started the study in the fall of 2019, right? It's been a while.
Yeah, no, it's
At that time, yeah, so it's based on your adopted 2040 transportation plan. So that is the current transportation plan. So you're still tied to the current officially adopted transportation plan. Over the course of this past year, the county updated its population projections and allocation of dwelling unit growth, expected growth in different areas of the county. So we had to go back in and kind of overhaul and rethink the mobility fee schedules to reflect those. So we've tried to keep current with current information. So we feel like we've made use of the best data we can, and that's effective and current.
Things have changed drastically with COVID. I was just looking up some statistics. 50% of the higher income people are telecommuting, not going to an office. 20% of lower income, because a lot of them can't. You've got a lot less people using buses, a lot less people using Sunrail, and I have friends that have pretty large companies with 3,000-4,000 employees. They're never going back to an office for each person. That model is done. So how do we, I look at this and go, this really isn't current anymore.
Yeah.
This does not tell us how people are going to be using the roads, the railroads, the buses, the bike paths.
One of the ordinance itself, we will look at this every 4 years. It's the same with all the impact fees. So, and hopefully within 4 years, what you're describing hopefully is kind of settled down so we have an idea of what to do, and then we can make adjustments to the plan then.
I just point out, your plan's based on incorrect data.
And I would not disagree with you.
I understand what you're doing. That's not an accusation.
And I understand what you're saying, too. Yeah, Bill's right. We're going to, you will revisit this mobility fee periodically, more frequently than every 4 years if you need to. One thing I do know is that it appears travel is coming back. Last numbers I think I saw were in the 95 to 96, 97% range of pre-COVID travel. The other thing that I kind of, in a way, take comfort in is the fact that we're only charging 21.7% of the maximum potential fee. So I don't think anybody can say you're overcharging in this case. You would have to have a five-fold increase in the fee for someone to say we're overcharging.
Well, you do. You have a five-fold increase for the
No.
rural
I mean
areas.
above where we are today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do. You do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me say that a bit differently. Five-fold increase above what's proposed. In other words, we're charging.
Well, I agree with your first statement. We have a huge increase in impact fees.
But the current fee,
which you just said may not be right, and we'll look at it in 4 years.
As information becomes more available. But the current fee is only 1/5 of the maximum potential fee you could justifiably charge.
I think I missed.
I'm sorry, I keep saying current fee. The proposed fee
Well, no, you're right.
is
I agree with
1/5. Right, okay, good.
I think I missed the review every 4 years. Where is that? What's the guarantee of that when it hasn't been looked at in so long? I mean, that's what we're doing tonight, is we're looking at all these impact fees that haven't been updated in so long. So how do we, even if the intention is that we go with incorrect data tonight, and then the intention is that we look at it in another 4 years, when it just doesn't happen?
What if it doesn't happen? I don't know. Let me refer to your attorney because it is in the ordinance as a requirement. But
Yeah, the requirement is in the ordinance that it has to be reviewed every 4 years. Also, the state statutes now require periodic review. and put the 4 years in there as well. And historically, in Seminole County, the impact fees served their purpose when they were adopted. But rather than continually go towards increasing the impact fees through the determinations of the Board of County Commissioners, they look to alternative fee sources such as the penny sales tax, which has been a very successful program and well supported by the community over the last 20 to 30 years. But again, that in and of itself is not going to carry the burden on the infrastructure into the future. So the thought process was to allow the new development to bear their proportionate fair share of the generation of the new impacts that they are generating.
So that statute that you referred to and the provision in the ordinance that says we're going to take another look at it in 4 years, those things weren't present before?
No.
Okay.
Paul, I have a question. So if I know you're trying to work something out with Oviedo, and Altamont's already got something worked out. If Oviedo adopts what we would call a core, would the whole calculation change for the rural boundary, because the trips would now be a lot shorter as Oviedo becomes a core?
Well, Oviedo's in the suburban district, not in the rural district.
I'm saying if they become a core.
They're in the suburban now.
Right.
If they do a study, and the study would have to be coordinated with us as far as the methodology, okay? And once there is a meeting of the minds, so to speak, of the methodology and the needs for what Oviedo wants to get accomplished and the needs of the county road system, because again, the county is responsible for the county road system, even though it may be with the county roads, the arterials and collectors run through the municipalities.
Sure.
They're still our responsibility.
Right, I understand that.
Similar to what we did in Altamont, Altamont took responsibility for the portion of the road system that is running through their jurisdiction that we are responsible for. So, and again, road trips do not end at the border of the jurisdiction of the city. It does run, their trips do come out into the county. So based on that, there was a meeting of the minds of what is fair and equitable, and they are required to participate and be responsible for a certain portion of our overall road system. I would expect that any interlocal agreements that are reached with the other jurisdictions, not limited to Oviedo, but Oviedo has expressed interest in doing that, as long as they're meeting their proportionate fair share of the overall system that we basically have established, even though they may be using a different methodology internally for the city, their system will work with ours and ours will work with theirs, and the road system itself is taken care of.
Okay. So the city of Oviedo would still be considered a suburban area as far as the county, even though they become a core as far as their impact fees.
I would expect that the numbers will work out, and Bill, you may want to address that a little bit more. I will defer to my numbers man.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, seriously,
That was a good answer.
There's as I've presented the fee and done this methodology.
Right.
There's technical considerations that can establish what the fee should be, the cost to the system, the length of your trips, how many trips you're generating, and so forth. There is a dearth of information regarding those technical aspects from the downtown area of a smaller suburban city. So, by golly, if they would like to do some studies of that, that would be great. I'd love to see it. But then the other way of adjusting and modifying a fee is, as I mentioned earlier, subsidizing the fee, finding other revenue sources to essentially buy down the fee for certain land uses that they really want to encourage. And so that's the other option that they would have to adjust and justify a lower fee. So they have the technical considerations and the economic incentive opportunities.
Okay.
And one more thing, philosophically, again, if they are saying that they have done certain things through their comprehensive plan to allow denser areas in core and redevelopment areas, denser areas mean more units. More units means generation of more fees. So if the fees are lower because it's in the core area, they would be generating more of those fees because more units are paying those fees. So we would expect some type of leveling out.
Okay.
Commissioner Grondorf, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about the dollar amounts that the rural areas are going to have to pay. They just go up quite substantially. And a convenience store in a rural area, I don't believe generates more travel to core areas. That would limit travel to core areas. So little things like medical offices, these are things that are needed in these rural areas. And if they're going to develop out there, they're going to have huge impact fees. So that almost forces them to go back into the suburban areas to even develop. I just think it's counterproductive to that particular area to have such an increase. I mean, if it was, $10,000 for a restaurant sit down is $10,000 in a suburban area, maybe $11,000, maybe it goes to 20. And to me, I just think it's a little bit excessive penalty for rural areas. I know the study probably dictates it a certain way, but when you really look at the practicality of it, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Rebecca, could you address the percentage of available commercial space in the rural area?
For the record, Rebecca Hammack, Development Services Director. Just to clarify, no new residential land use or zoning is permitted within the rural area when the rural area was... commercial. Yeah, no residential. No new non-residential land use or zoning is permitted within the rural area. When the rural area was created in the early 90s, they created 3 future land use categories and 3 zoning categories for all the property within the rural area. So you have Rural 10, Rural 5, and Rural 3 for your future land use designations, which allow 1 dwelling unit per 10 acre, 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, and 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres. And then you have the compatible zoning districts of A10, A5, and A3. There are some existing legal non-conforming land uses and zoning within the rural area, and there is a small amount of commercial land use and zoning that's within the rural area. And those could potentially develop with non-residential uses, but it's a very small number. There's existing developed commercial property that's there now, and there's approximately 6 areas along State Road 46 that have existing commercial land use and zoning that could potentially develop in the future. But there's not going to be a large amount of non-residential development in the rural area.
Other questions, staff?
I have another one.
Commissioner Lopez?
Churches. I see that you're putting on a mobility fee on churches granted non-sanctuary space. So what is non-sanctuary space exactly? Are we talking the kitchen and private offices?
Right, staff offices, things that would be used on the fees are basically set up for typical weekday operations. So it would be space dedicated to the normal weekday operations.
Is that how it's currently done with impact fees then, in regards to churches? My understanding of churches is basically they don't pay property taxes. I get that. But how is it currently done with the impact fees?
Yeah, this is a fee, so it's not a tax.
So it's currently in place along the same lines?
Right.
So not against the sanctuary, but any other space? Okay.
Other questions, staff? Okay, then we'll move on to public comment. I have a couple speakers here in support. First, I have Kok Ma, representing the city of Oviedo.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and Commissions. My name is Kakwan Ma, 225 East Robinson Street, Orlando, Florida, 32801. I am here representing the city of Oviedo. Basically, there was a letter that was written dated May 13th that was sent to this commission as well as the Board of County Commissioners. You probably have a copy of that. In that letter, there were 4 items that the city wanted to see either changed or addressed with the current proposed ordinance. And so we've been working with staff since, well, I guess the first time I was in front of this commission was in January. And so during that entire time, we've been working back and forth through video conferences and phone calls between city staff and county staff to try and find a middle ground, a compromise, to make sure that the interests of the city of Oviedo have been addressed and recognized. And so I'm here this evening because the city of Oviedo would like to make sure that those 4 points are addressed before any approval is done for the ordinance. I didn't want to fill out a form that says that we were not in support of the ordinance. The city, the city is in support of the ordinance, but we still have concerns that we want to make sure are addressed before it is adopted.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I have a question. Are you asking us to just delay voting on this?
Saying that they still have stuff to work out.
I don't know exactly where the process is. My understanding is the county legal is reviewing the proposed changes as well as some of the other to address the concerns that the city has. I guess what the city's desire would be is to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before a vote to approve the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I ask him to just address those 4 issues?
Certainly.
Sure.
Thank you.
So,
For the record?
yep. So I did attend the special session workshop for the Board of County Commissioners on the 18th as well, and this letter was entered into record at that time. But again, there were 4 items that the city of Oviedo would like to make sure are addressed. The first one is the method for a municipality to opt out of the ordinance. And the way that it is written, the city of Oviedo just would like to have the same treatment that's been afforded to the city of Altamont Springs. And the way that the mobility fee is written currently in section 120.3 part I is that the section simply requires that the Board of County Commissioners will consider adopting an amendment to the mobility fee ordinance. And the city feels that there should be at least a stronger, more concrete, or more defined stance for a municipality to be able to opt out instead of the will consider part. The second point is the assignment of properties to the mobility fee district. It is the collective opinion. This was the original catalyst that the reason why the city wanted to have this have me represent them in this is that it's a collective opinion that the city feels that there's a failure in the designation of the different districts, the core, the suburban, and the rural, with all of the development that has happened in Oviedo and all of the effort that's being made within their CRA to have the higher densities, to leave out that central area from the core, they feel is unfair and inequitable. So that was the second point. Third one is the participation in the appeals process. And simply stated, if a developer or applicant wants to appeal the determination for the mobility fee that's assessed for them, it is handled by the county engineer with no input from the municipality involved. And so the city feels that the municipalities should also be involved in that process. And then the last point is the utilization of the collected fees. The proposed mobility fee ordinance includes a provision that permits mobility fees collected for a proposed development in a district to be used and spent, that can be used and spent elsewhere within that district with no requirement that the expenditure have any connection to or nexus with the proposed development for which it was collected. So if a fee is collected within Oviedo, it should have benefit for the Oviedo residents as well as businesses there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next in support, I have Cindy Holler.
Good evening, Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Cindy Holler, for the record, 1731 Beacon Drive, Sanford. I'm in favor of smart development, and the reason why I want to speak in favor of the fees, I think there's been a lot of work done by both county staff and the Citizens Advisory Board that has resulted in a really sound planning, and I think your questions have been really, really good too. A few different things. Rates have not changed in 25 to 30 years, depending upon the impact fee. Adding just the annual percentage increase in construction costs to the old rates would be about equal to what's being proposed. Developers need to fairly pay for their impacts so that taxpayers don't get stuck with the bill, or we end up with overcrowded roads and not enough fire stations and equipment to address growth. And I understand that there were different, fees addressed. This is kind of like encompassing. Finally, any developer that complains about these proposed fees needs to look at the higher rates in Orange, Osceola, and Volusia counties, and those are neighboring counties. Those higher rates are not impeding record development growth in those counties. People pay for quality housing and a great quality of life, which many come here to Seminole County for. Builders are dealing with huge increases in the cost of building materials, which is a cost of doing business. Just like impact fees. Houses are selling like wildfire right now, despite higher impact fees in surrounding counties and much higher material and labor costs. Eventually, our great schools will be overcrowded, and so will our roads. And I've heard some complaints about that today. And our fire rating will get worse, which means a lower quality of life and less development. People buy houses and rent apartments here for the quality of life. So, in closing, the world is not going to end in Seminole County with fair impact fees that are less than that of surrounding counties. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. In opposition, I have Jonathan Hughes. Did I say that correctly?
Good evening, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. You did say that correctly. My name is Jonathan Hewells, and I'm with the Lowndes Law Firm at 215 North Eola Drive, Orlando, 32801. And appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this evening. And really, the purposes of this short PowerPoint presentation is just to summarize the points of contention that were made in a letter that I had sent to you through the county attorney, Paul Chipok. Just really setting forth some points of contention that we see with the proposed ordinance and study as it's both are drafted today, and they're being submitted on behalf of one of our clients that is a contract purchaser of a property in the rural area of the county. So, next slide, please. So before just talking about the points of contention, yeah, I think it's important to just understand the kind of legal standard that's going to be applied to this ordinance if it's adopted, when it's adopted. And it's that the county, if it is challenged, it has the burden of proving by a preponderance of evidence that the imposition of the fees meet the requirements of state legal precedent and Section 163.31801 of the Florida statutes, otherwise known as the Florida Impact Fee Act. And it goes on to state that, unlike many other government decisions, the court is not to give a deferential standard to the county. Next slide, please. So our first point of contention, and it was brought up by Commissioner Turnage, is that there's a lot of data sources in the study, but a few of them don't seem to meet one of the requirements of that Florida Impact Fee Act, which is that it must be based on the most recent and localized data. And we have the 2040 transportation plan that the county has adopted, but that's based on data that was completed in 2017. So that data is at least 4 years old. We don't think that would be considered most recent. And there's other study that was incorporated or the study incorporates data from the National Household Transportation Study, which is a national study that conducted between 2013 and 2017. So you're talking about data that's anywhere from 8 to 4 years old, and the scope of it just wouldn't seem that it would be considered either recent or localized. And finally, the study it says this on its face, that it's not based strictly on data, but instead partially based on a policy merits, which includes providing that fees are the highest in the rural district to support Seminole County's comprehensive plan and land use and transportation elements that advise the protection of the rural character. And we don't think that policy is a replacement for data. We don't think that the state mandates would allow that if it was challenged. And so we think that it bears some consideration of maybe further refining the backup. May I have one more minute, Madam Chair? Thank you. I'll try to go faster, and I apologize. The next slide, please. Thank you. And then we talk about some of the rational nexus tests that are applied and would be applied if challenged, and that there needs to be a rational nexus between the need for the additional capital facilities and the increased impact generated from the new residential and commercial development. And right now, the proposed fee framework has the rural district paying a fee that's 269% higher than the suburban district. Now, the stated basis for this differential treatment are trip length factors that have been assigned to each district, and with the greater weighting placed on the rural district. But we could not find that there was any supporting data analysis in either the study or its appendices to back up these trip length factors, which are very important because they set the basis for what is going to be set for the fee schedule. And so without that empirical data to review, we have no idea where these trip length factors came from and how they result in a fee for the rural district that is 269% higher than what it is for the suburban district. Next slide, please. State law also mandates that there needs to be a rational nexus between the expenditure of funds and the benefits accruing to that new residential and non-residential construction that has paid the fees. And the ordinance right now as drafted provides the county engineer with broad authority to transfer monies from one fee trust account to another by making a written determination of reasonable benefits. And there's no other standards in either the ordinance to guide that. And we think that without having some specific standards of what reasonable benefits is, or some type of additional analysis that would have to take place to reach reasonable benefits, is going to run afoul. It's what I would consider, legal speak, arbitrary and capricious. And I don't think if it was challenged that the county is going to be able to carry the burden of proving that it's not by a preponderance of evidence.
Mr. Hulse, please wrap up.
What's that? Sorry?
Please wrap up.
Sorry. Okay, well, there's a couple more items, and I think the important point here is that while my client and I am generally supportive of a new mobility fee, I think it's a great direction the county should hide. Just last slide would be great. We just are asking to continue this public hearing and get some answers about some of these points of contention and bring it back before you and see if they can be addressed. And I appreciate Mr. Wharton recognizing the letter in the record and some manner to try to address them. But I think in order for this board to make a recommendation to the BCC, they need to be first resolved, the issues that have been pointed out. Thank you.
Okay. Linda Barker in opposition.
Linda Barker, 3405 South Melville Avenue. I completely agree with Cindy Haller, and I'm also in agreement with the increased fees. What I object to is the methodology. I believe Mr. Grundorf made reference to why would you be paying more in a rural area? That just does not seem fair. If you collect fees in a rural area, I think that should be spent in rural areas. Also, as far as people being in was there some reference to being in a larger home, you would make more trips? That doesn't make any sense. If you have the ability to work at home and be on your computer, which is the direction we're going, obviously, in the last couple of years, you're not going to be leaving your house. And especially people in rural areas, the reason why they live in rural areas is they don't want to live in that kind of density situation. So, there are days when I have the privilege not have to leave my house for a couple of days. We are over on a county road now. It's in a less dense area. And we have major traffic issues. And one of these days I'm going to speak in a public hearing, but the county doesn't have any money for traffic calming and so on and so forth. So the infrastructure in the city is already there in place for the most part. I think the focus really probably should be in some of the developing rural areas. And basically, I think it should be continued. Like I say, the methodology is what threw me. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any other comment cards. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak in support or in opposition to this item? Mary, do we have anyone online?
Yes, I have Mr. Humphreys. He will need to unmute himself.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay, you can speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Joe Humphreys. I live at 883 Cardinal Point Cove. I'm in one of those semi-rural areas. I'm not a dedicated, but I am in the WARPA. Again, as somebody who has invested a significant amount of money in this county for a reason, having moved here from Orange County, somebody, again, with a background in real estate development, raising funds, helping write condominium documents and so on. Just to kind of put things into kind of a local perspective, if you want to build a supermarket in Orange County, in the urban area, your impact fee just for transportation, not for schools, not for parks and recreation, simply for the transportation, it's $16,070, regardless of how big the store is. In the suburban area, it's $18,789. The rural area is the highest
as we've talked about here today, that's $20,016. Again, that's not permitting fees, that's not school fees, parks fees, library fees, law enforcement, fire, that's strictly transportation. For a single-family detached home in the 2,000 to 3,500 square foot, which is in many areas of Seminole County is a kind of a standard, you're looking at, in the urban area, the impact fee is $10,163. In the suburban area, it's $12,509, and in the rural area, it's $14,294. And unlike Seminole County, which has waited 20-plus years to raise their fees, Orange County does this pretty much on a regular, almost annualized basis, because those fees changed in this last year, okay, during a period of COVID. Now, the point of COVID came up, yes. Again, as somebody who has family involved in this business around the country, every business is trying to figure out how we're going to do business going forward. Some will go backwards, some will not. But that's the point. And as you look at the people that are moving to Florida, it's something I've studied for since the 70s, the people that are now moving into the state of Florida, Seminole County specifically, are from much higher area as far as fees, taxes, and so on. So when, for us living here locally, when we start to look at these fees, they sound exponential. But when you start putting these into a national perspective and even a regional perspective, these fees are anything but out of line. If anything, I would suggest that they might be lower. As far as building costs and stuff, guess what? The county's costs are going up at the same time as the developers. And I can tell you, having worked for developers, we always find a way to make money. And I can tell you for a fact that the developers, and my homes happens to be one that I happen to be a part owner in, is making profits in Orange County as much, if not more so, than they are in Seminole County, with much higher impact fees and the same kind of building costs. I support what the staff has done. This is going to be a constant evolution. COVID has changed the way we do business in every facet of business, period, our government, and it's going to continue to change going forward. Nobody at this point has an answer, an explicit answer to how things are going to be next week, next month, or next year. It's going to be a moving target for the foreseeable future. To do nothing at this point, continue to kick this can down the road, is just going to continue to compound the problem. I urge you to support their efforts. It's up to the county commissioners then to also tweak down and make additional improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Mary, anyone else?
No one else.
Okay, with that, we'll close public comment. Mr. Wharton, did you want a chance to rebut?
Just wanted to say that we will address both the City of Oviedo's letter and Mr. Hewlett's letter, the concerns that they have in there before we take it to the board. And I would suggest if this board does decide to take, if this commission does decide to take action this evening, along with your recommendations, can be recommendations for staff to accomplish whatever you think needs to be done before it goes before the board.
Mr. Wharton, when is it going before the board?
Beg your pardon?
When is it scheduled to go before the board?
The 22nd of this month?
If the City of Oviedo's concerns haven't been addressed yet in all these months that it's been tabled, why would they be before the 22nd?
Greater emphasis placed on them, to be very honest.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to give a cursory response to Oviedo and to Mr. Yule's comments if
Okay,
you want
go
to
ahead.
indulge me. With the City of Oviedo, on the methodology for the municipality to opt out, we do have that at section 120.3 I, that it's in there. The city had suggested some alternative language, which in effect would be self-executing, as I mentioned in the letter. So if they did a study unilaterally, it would negate our mobility fee ordinance. That's not exactly what we did with Altamont. With Altamont, they did a study. We negotiated with them during their update to this study to determine which road segments they would be responsible for. And then as a result of that, in this ordinance, we put in the exemption language for the City of Altamont. To effectuate that going forward, we would need to have an arm's length transaction with the jurisdiction, be it Oviedo or any of the other cities, to make sure that the road segments that we are concerned with are taken care of. And with that, then the board would consider, and again, it's through an interlocal agreement that those sections would be taken care of and excised out of the ordinance. Okay? Their second point of contention was assignment of properties to the mobility fee district. And in there, the May 19th draft that you have before you at section 120.13B, starting at line 560, has an alternative fee calculation to establish a court district within a city. And basically, there are criteria for what they have to do to establish that, what we would be expecting, and the results would be an interlocal agreement. And if the interlocal agreement is executed and entered into, those fees would apply in that area, and then the map would be, our maps that are part of the ordinance would be updated at the next cycle. But the fee would be effective as of the implementation of the interlocal agreement. In regards to the municipal participation in the appeal process, interesting that it's raised now. This is the same language that we have in our current road impact fee ordinance, without much change other than to do the strike-through and underline to say mobility fee rather than road impact fee. Again, this process is the same, and again, it's a county ordinance, so it's county administration of the process. And again, the mobility fee is taking care of the county road system, whether that road system is within a jurisdiction, a municipal jurisdiction, or in the unincorporated area. We are still ultimately responsible for that road system and the improvements to it. So it's not dealing with local roads within the city. It's dealing with the county roads that run through the city. So that's why they're not part of the appeal process. But again, we're open to further discussion on that. As far as the utilization of the collected mobility fees, under the use of the monies, the mobility fee is to be used in the district from which it is collected. And again, the districts run in a north-south manner through the county. And the districts incorporate multiple jurisdictions, multiple city jurisdictions. So we're using the money in the impact fee district that it is generated from. And that money may be used in one or two or three of the municipalities that happen to be within that district. We are restricted to using it within the district. And we have the 4 districts, as was pointed out before, the rural, the suburban west, the suburban east, and the core. So the monies will be utilized in the district that they are generated from. The fact that there are multiple jurisdictions or multiple cities within the county district, it's a matter of how we have to administer the ordinance. And again, the cities do have the ability to opt out if they so want. That's the Oviedo letter. Mr. Yule's letter, and again, we're struggling, or we're not struggling, but we're seeking to make sure that our ordinance has fairness, equity, and predictability. Those are the mantra words that we're using with these ordinances. In regards to the language of the most, based on the most recent and localized data, again, our county study, again, is a living document at this point and is not finalized. We're still taking into consideration, it'll be adopted and finalized by the Board of County Commissioners when and if the ordinance is adopted. And again, at this point, it's scheduled for June 22nd. It's based on the most recent adopted materials that we have. Granted, with the nature of everything, there is always new information and anecdotal information that's generated. We can't use anecdotal information. We have to base it on other established studies. So with that, our consultant took the established studies and then extrapolated from that his own conclusions, which are based in our study. So we're confident that our materials are sufficient in the most recent, again, adopted materials. In regards to their second stated concern that the county cannot demonstrate that the proposed fees in the rural district should be a greater percent higher than suburban fees. Again, and this one, and again, I don't know if Bill Oliver wants to address it again, but again, the fees are based on the formula, okay? So it's formulatic, and again, the road trip lengths are a large part of that formula, which leads to the higher fees. The county, his next concern was the county cannot move money from one fee trust account to another. Impacts can move beyond one district, but the fees have to be justified. And we have that in the ordinance. And again, that's at section 120.14 under use of money, subsection C, starting at line 626 in the ordinance. And then at 633 in the ordinance, to move the money, it's not arbitrary. We tried to draft it as tightly as possible, and it says, prior to encumbering mobility fees in this manner, the county engineer or designee must make a written determination that the transportation capital improvement will benefit new development in the fee district from which the mobility fees have been collected. Number two, the planned transportation capital improvement is of a nature that will add capacity to the county mobility system that serves travel from the travel increasing development, that's the new project, in other fee districts. And three, the need for the transportation capital improvement arises in part from the new development in the fee district from which the mobility fees have been collected. So we have tried to make that bridge for when the fees will be moved. It's not an arbitrary, again, it has to be an analysis that those three criteria are met. And in regards to his fourth point of no expressed demonstration of extraordinary circumstance, we believe that the county has addressed our extraordinary circumstances, and the need for development to address these is the nature of it, the fair share in the future development of the fee structure. So again, we went into a lot of depth at the Board of County Commissioner workshop, and again, there is the second workshop, and what is the date of that workshop? The second workshop? The 8th, June 8th, there will be another workshop to go into more depth on that need of extraordinary circumstances.
Mr. Shebeck, before we saw this item the first time, I guess maybe January, it came to us initially, and the city of Altamont Springs had already worked out their agreement. It was part of the plan, right?
Yes.
At whatever point that negotiation began with the city of Altamont, was the city of Sanford and the city of Oviedo that have both expressed concerns, were they notified of it so that they could begin asking their questions, or did they only get the opportunity to start that more recently?
It's the exact dates, I'm not sure. It's been an evolving process. We have, I believe as part of the ordinance,
That is a frog.
pay no attention to that frog behind the door.
That's a frog, I'm leaving, I'm just telling you now.
Is he taunting you, Paul?
No. And I've had worse hecklers, so I'm okay. In there, we do have a list on Exhibit 1 to the ordinance. We have the mobility fee meeting schedule, and we've been meeting with the various jurisdictions, and we have the listing of when we've had direct meetings with them. So Oviedo, we met with on March 8th. Sanford, we met with on March 11th in particular. But again, the notice of these meetings, or of the impact fee, again, has been on the streets, so to speak, for a period of time.
It sounds like that was all after the initial plan was put out, though, so that they've had a lot less time maybe to work with the county and get their concerns resolved.
The only way I can really respond to that is they need something to respond to. So if we had no plan that they could review, I don't know where we would be with the type of input that they want.
If you don't mind, Madam Chair, if you can give me some privilege here. So the mobility fee process has been going on since 2019, and we held initial meetings with the cities at the beginning of the process. So all of the cities had an opportunity to know what was happening. We've shared this data with the studies with them, draft studies. We've had multiple meetings with them. So it just happened that Altamont Springs already had a fee in place and was moving forward with this. But we've had opportunities with all of the cities to let them know and review the data, and have had multiple meetings with them.
Okay, we'll move on to board discussion or a motion.
I wanted to ask, has there been a comparison to what Altamont's doing?
A comparison of
the mobility, the fees?
Of the rates, or?
The rates, which seems to be of concern with us. I wonder how that compares against what
Their
we're
rates are a
proposing.
little bit higher. For a single-family home, their rates are slightly higher than what our proposed rates are, I believe.
Okay.
Other discussion?
I think, and I'm shooting from recall here because I have compared. So Altamont Springs, part of Altamont Springs is inside the core district and part of it's in the suburban district. I believe our core fee districts are actually a little less than theirs, but our suburban fees are higher, I think is the way it stacks up.
And I stand corrected, mine was for multifamily fees. There was a particular case, the multifamily fees that we're charging is, or proposed to charge, are less than what the city is charging.
Thank you.
Other discussion?
Where do I start? It was already presented. The whole thing is based on data from 2017 and before. It's not just anecdotal. I mean, things have changed dramatically and permanently for transportation, working at home, bus ridership, train ridership. I think it's just, this whole thing needs to be done all over again. And the fact that you might look at it in 4 years does not give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. I think we have to allow the other cities to opt out. We've obviously allowed Altamont Springs to opt out, not to consider it, but you've already allowed Altamont Springs to opt out. I think it's, what do you call it, self-activating. I'm concerned about moving fees from one fund to another. If it was more fair, more even, I would be less worried. But if I lived in the rural area and I paid a 5-fold increase in impact fee and then found out it was moved to the urban area, I'd be pretty upset. And I don't see a rational nexus for the difference between rural and suburban being 270%, or for the increase in the rural to go from $705 for a small house to $3,656.
Yeah, I concur. I'm very concerned that since January, we've been tabling this. It's one of the reasons specifically being that something could be worked out with the city of Oviedo, and it seems like not much progress has been made, but we're supposed to believe that something will happen in the next couple of weeks. We've heard, I mean, everyone who spoke tonight who was opposed requested that this be tabled. There's questions of whether or not it's even legal, or if it's going to incite some litigation. I mean, we've tabled things for a lot less to go back and talk to a developer and get, community concerns worked out. I think there's still a lot to work out. I mean, I thought that the city of Oviedo's points in their letter, every one of them was salient.
Well, I have a question.
And some of them, a couple of them, not difficult to resolve at all.
Yeah. Is any of these funds allowed to be used for Sunrail subsidy?
The current plan does not contemplate Sunrail at all, as far as this.
But there is wording in there saying it can be used for capital improvements?
It's for capital improvements, yes.
For Sunrail?
Well,
yes.
would you consider Sunrail a capital improvement? It's existing.
I don't know what that means.
Again, the driving document of where the monies can be spent is based on our transportation plan, which is adopted by our comprehensive plan.
Okay. I know we're going to be having a very large, the debt's going to have to come up here with Sunrail eventually. How does the county plan on paying for it? Do they plan on paying for it through the impact fee process? Or is there some other fee that we're going to have, or a method of paying for that Sunrail?
I do not have an answer for that question at this point in time. I know those discussions will be forthcoming. I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, the rest of staff, at the prior workshops, I mean, starting in 2019, those questions were raised, and the focus is not to utilize this for that purpose.
The focus is not to utilize it for it, but there's nothing that says it can't be used for that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
I think we have some interjections.
For the record, John Zeresh, Public Works Director and County Engineer. The impact fee will not be used for the Sunrail. The funding for Sunrail has not been determined by the board, what type of funding. The transition for Sunrail will not happen until 2024.
As soon as the DeLand segment is complete, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
So why is there language in there saying that it can be?
Bill Oliver, can you imagine? There is no.
Again, by statute, impact fees or mobility fees can only be utilized for capital improvements.
Which could include Sunrail.
And
for capital improvements to Sunrail, not for the operation.
I'm not sure I would call an existing Sunrail line a capital improvement, a subsidy.
It's in there.
Right, and exactly. So it can't be used for the O&M,
And the
operations and maintenance.
in the 2040, we do not have the 2040 master plan, transportation master plan does not include the Sunrail improvement, any capital of the Sunrail in that master plan. And the fee is based on the shortfall between what the penny tax can provide for that plan. And the Sunrail, it is not, the capital improvement for Sunrail is not included in the 2040.
So at some point, the county is going to have to make a decision on how to fund Sunrail.
Yes, sir.
But we don't know what that's going to look like.
Not at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board discussion?
The only thing I struggle with is, do the municipalities have they had the chance to be proactive and chosen not to? Why was Altamont proactive and nobody else was? It sounds like it's a choice. Now, I don't know enough because of the meetings to know whether they had time and chose not to, or whether they didn't have time.
How long does Altamont have their fee in place? Does anybody know?
Their original ordinance was in 2016, but again, that was only within the boundaries of Altamont. They amended their ordinance in 2019?
19 or 20, yeah.
Yeah, in 2020, I think it was adopted, and that was after the discussions and negotiations where they took over responsibility for certain road segments that we otherwise would have responsibility for.
So, yeah, I think it comes down to a question of timing. It just happened that Altamont Springs was in the process of doing an update to their mobility plan the same time that Seminole County started their process, where the other cities hadn't even contemplated doing mobility. And as you know, it takes a while to staff up and get the funding in place and those types of things to do this type of study. So it really came down to an issue of timing.
Has any, I guess I'm not really too concerned with Winter Springs because of, it really doesn't have any density to speak of. But, Longwood, Castleberry, the ones that are within the core, and they haven't reached out or started any kind of process with the county?
Again, Bill Wharton, Transportation Plan Manager of the Engineering Division. We've had meetings with the city, particularly through March, and follow up with phone calls. The other cities may be thinking about doing something, but they have given no indication that they don't support the mobility fee, or if they would like to do something different on their own.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
I'd like to move that we recommend the Board of County Commissioners deny the ordinance amending Chapter 120 road impact fees of the Land Development Code to revise and refine the regulations to replace road impact fees with mobility fees.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed? Nay.
Okay, one opposed and 4 in favor of recommending in denial.
I can share my reasons if you.
Sure, if you'd like to, for the record.
Yeah, I'm just basically, I'm having this argument in my head. I don't want this. This is something that's been worked on for such a considerable amount of time, and we don't want to keep kicking this down the road. And then on the other side of it, the city of Oviedo and the law firm has brought forth some very valid concerns. We're hearing discussion that this can be worked out before the county commissioners meeting in June 22nd. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, what if we just deferred this till the next meeting? We can get those concerns worked out by our next planning and zoning meeting in July, and then we'll be able to present this to the county commissioners and for their next meeting at the end of July. So that's just kind of because I'm continuing to have this argument with myself. I couldn't outright deny the say yay for the denial.
Okay, we'll move on then to item number 6.
Okay, good evening. Joy Giles, Senior Planner for the Planning and Development Division. This request is for a rezone from R1A single-family dwelling to R1A single-family dwelling for a single-family residential subdivision on 39 acres located on the east side of Sipes Avenue, south of East Lake Mary Boulevard. The applicant proposes to develop the subject property as a single-family residential subdivision in compliance with the R1A zoning district with a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet and a minimum building width of 75 feet. Excuse me, a minimum lot width of 75 feet. The subject property has a low-density residential future land use designation, which permits a maximum of 4 dwelling units per net buildable acre. The site is identified as being located in Sub-Area 4 under the Seminole County City of Sanford Joint Planning Agreement, or JPA, which currently limits the density to 2.5 units per net buildable acre. However, in July of 2014, prior to the approval of the amended JPA, the Board of County Commissioners approved a rezone on the subject property from A1 to R1A and limited the density to 2.95 dwelling units per net buildable acre. With the approval in 2014, there was a development order associated with that, and there were additional conditions that the applicant at the time proposed to place on the development. Those additional commitments were a minimum house size of 2,100 square feet, a minimum of 15% open space to be provided, including an active park of no less than 18,000 square feet, the installation of a masonry wall along the perimeter of the property, and a minimum right-of-way dedication along Sipes Avenue and the widening of Sipes Avenue, the widening of the pavement to 20 feet in width. I'm sorry, can you hear me? I think this is cutting out a little bit. Okay. So the applicant is now requesting a rezone from R1A to R1A in order to amend the development order. So I just want to explain for a quick minute that the R1A zoning district is a traditional zoning classification. It typically is not associated with the development order. However, the development order was placed on this zoning at the Board of County Commissioners public hearing meeting That was done because the developer was offering additional conditions. And so the only way to adhere to that was to create a development order for the zoning. So that's why this is being seen again, because the applicant is requesting to change a few of the conditions. So one of the conditions they want to change is the minimum house size. They want to reduce it from the 2,100 square foot minimum to 1,500 square foot minimum. And so under the R1A zoning today, as it stands, the minimum house size is 1,100 square feet. The 15% open space, they're going to keep that. They're not asking for a change in that. They are asking for a change in the requirement of the masonry wall. Instead of just being located along Sipes, they're asking for it to only be located along Sipes Avenue, and then a fence to be located along the remaining perimeter of the site. Staff did review the minutes from the 2014 BCC meeting, and we determined that we believe it was the intention of the board to only require the wall along Sipes Avenue based on the minutes. However, when the development order was drafted, it just stated the perimeter of the development would provide the wall. The applicant is also requesting to omit the requirement of additional right-of-way being obtained along Sipes, and to also omit the requirement of the widening of Sipes to 20 feet in width. Instead of that, they are proposing to come down Pine Way and improve Pine Way. So staff is not in support of that change. Staff is currently requiring that Sipes Avenue be improved to county standard. Let's see. So with that being said, I will say that staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the ordinance enacting a rezone from R1A to R1A and approve staff's proposed development order, which is in your package. You will see two different development orders, one that is proposed by the applicant and one is proposed by staff. And staff is recommending approval based on the adoption of staff's development order. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Is the applicant present?
Good evening. Steve Coover, 230 North Park Avenue, Sanford, Florida. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Central Florida Holdings, LLC. They are not the owner. As fate would have it, I was in this chamber in 2014 when the Board of County Commissioner hearing took place on this. It wasn't my item. I live out in the neighborhood. So I kind of remember what happened. It was a long hearing. I'll be brief since you've been here all night, and so have I. We agree with every one of staff's recommendations and their findings, except that we asked for a deviation to Pine Way because the right-of-way along Sipes is not something that we can deal with. It wasn't anything that the last applicant could deal with. The right-of-way is just a mess there. I just got involved in this recently, and I've spoken to engineering today, at least, and they've basically told me they're working to try and come up with a solution. At this point in time, I would just say that I'm going to reserve the rest of my time to rebut, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant? No? In that case, we have some members of the audience who would like to speak against this item. First, I have Soanne Droz.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and Board. Thank you for listening to what we have to say here. My husband and I bought our property over there on the corner of Pine Way and Brisson. Oh, by the way, I live on 2530 Pine Way, Sanford 32773, right in the corner of Pine Way and Brisson. We moved into a rural area in 2006, and we've watched it grow around us. And when I mean around us, it's around us. We've got Kensington there, we've got Wyndham States, we've got the other subdivision down the street. Bill Colbert across the street is selling lots. He has the decency to sell his lots for acre increments, okay? You're talking about 1,115 square foot homes. That's a wildlife preserve back there. Now, I'm very into the wildlife. When we moved in, our neighbors were moo cows, okay? We're into the wildlife. That's harboring our migrating birds that come. It gives them food. It gives them a place to live. The ponds on there, the trees, the forest. It keeps the noise away from us. We saw everything grow around us. We were practically destroyed. Commissioner Zembauer came in and gave us a line to pull us out of what was going on. We were being flooded by drainage. No matter what these developers tell you, the drainage is going to be better. Trust me, it's not. We're not in a flood zone, but we are now. When these rains come in this year, we're going to flood again. The commissioner came in, he did some work on our property to try and satisfy us. He did a great deed, we are grateful, but still, it's not the same. We will flood again because of the drainage there. Again, back to the animals, the forest. We've got nothing left there. We're surrounded by homes. Pine Way, they want to build up the road in Pine Way. What does that mean? Because we're being destroyed every day with the trucks going by with dirt, construction materials. They come down Brisson, they turn on Pine Way. We're on the corner. Our fence gets hit. I've asked the road people to fix it many times. There's a big ditch right in front of our fence. The wheels pop and they hit our fence. It's just gone too far. There's too much there. Our schools are overcrowded. Our roads are overcrowded. Our water can't take it. We can't take it personally. It's just too much. I'd like you to rethink it and come up with a better solution than this. Thank you so very much for listening.
Diane Sorrell?
Hi, I'm Diane Sorrell. I live at 2980 Pine Way. Unincorporated Sanford rural for now, and across from me is where they want to build more homes that our area cannot tolerate. When we moved in 2007, when I was going to work, I worked at AT&T. There was about 15 wild boars in front of my car. I couldn't go anywhere. That's the kind of neighbors I used to have. We live at the corner of Sipes and Pine Way. It's a disaster. We have tractor-trailer trucks coming down there, school buses at the same time. We've called several times. They've had to come and fix it because they've gone into our drainage ditch. We're afraid there's going to be a head-on collision there one of these days. And then by saying they're going to fix Pine Way, what does that mean? Right now, there's cracks everywhere. There's holes. I just don't understand, and I am just so upset about this. If you go down Kentucky down there, they just put tons of houses down there and a new school, but this is right across from me. And I know there was an issue with the right-of-way because that's why the houses aren't there, but I also heard, because we saw 3 to 4 different survey companies come out recently, put orange stuff all over my property, knock stuff down because they had to find where our property was. And there's still an issue with the right-of-way. That's what I heard from several people. So I'm not sure why they want to build so many more houses, and I know people are moving in here, I get that, but the amount of homes they want to build, and I'm going to lose my privacy because right now we have, to the east and to the south, we have trees and we have the ditch, draining ditch. And right now, we're going to lose all that, and there's going to be so much traffic. I don't understand how they're going to, and you know people are going to go down Sipes if you decide to go to Pine Way and improve it. Oh yeah, and the sidewalks. My husband and I walk every day. I had a stroke a few years ago, and I try to walk, and I take care of my elderly mom. And that's my time, a half hour to walk every day. Thank God I got life insurance. They have a sidewalk in front of the new Wyndham Preserve. It only goes in front of the wall, and that's it. And we have to walk on the side of the road, and when cars come in, it's not a relaxing half-hour walk, because you have to look everywhere, and you have to run onto the grass, because they fly down there. Where's our sidewalks? What are you going to do to improve? I would like to know the whole kit and caboodle of how you're going to improve our area. And people are going to go down Sipes. I don't understand how those roads are going to tolerate this. So please reconsider what is going on, and just think about the people that have been there, that have acreage, and we appreciate your understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Mike Sorrell? Following him, I have John Spolsky, if you want to get ready to come up next.
Good evening, and thank you for being here so late. Mike Sorrell, 2980 Pine Way, Sanford. As my wife alluded to, it's just a mess. Our corner, our southwestern corner of our property, when it rains, is flooded. That's right at the curve. It overflows into the gully and onto the street right at the curve. I can't stress enough on this road improvement. If any one of you think that they're not going to go up Sipes if they put 100-something houses in that subdivision over there, proposed subdivision, if you don't think they're going up Sipes when they leave, you're all nuts. Sorry, but that's how I feel about it, because they're not going to improve Sipes. They need to improve the whole area over there. You got Kentucky going to feed in. They're all going to head down the back roads through Pine Way, and that's a 2-mile trip all the way to Sanford Avenue from my house. Are they going to improve all of that or just the corner? I don't understand what improvements they're going to do. I think the county commission, when they changed it from agricultural to R1A, whatever it is now, they put the cart before the horse. Please don't do that. Reconsider. This doesn't need to happen. The survey is a mess. Everybody knows. What's Pine Way? Is that okay? There's a bridge to the Navy Canal. Is that going to be wide enough to handle all the traffic? 2 buses come down. And when 2 buses cross on either Pine Way or Sipes, their wheels are on the side. So both roads need to be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have Mr. Spolsky, and then after him, I have Linda Barker.
Good evening. I'm John Spolsky. I reside at 136 North High Street in Lake Marion. As was discussed earlier, in 2014, this came before the county. My brother, Kevin, and numerous neighbors vehemently opposed the rezoning of that property. The county went through. They rezoned it from agricultural to R1A. I wish my brother could be here to continue this fight. The county had made, major concessions then in granting the rezoning, including greater density on that property. But in that, they mandated the improvements had to be done by the developer along Sipes, from Sipes all the way to East Lake Mary Road. Additionally, as part of that development order, in their concessions, even though R1A, as was stated earlier, is only 1,100 square feet per house, they mandated the houses be 2,100 square feet, so that it would, if it was built, that it would follow the character of that area as far as the size of the houses, the nature of the neighborhood, and what have you. Now, 7 years later, the developer is asking the county to change everything that was agreed to back then, as far as the roadway that the traffic is going to utilize, the size of the houses, privacy walls. Where does it end? Why are they coming back now? Because they realize how expensive that's going to be for the road improvements that they have to pay for, not the county. They agreed as part of the development order. Why would they reduce a house from 2,100 feet down to 1,500 feet? Makes absolutely no sense to me as far as why they would do that, as far as trying to recoup their investment on a larger size house than a smaller house. Could it be that they're going to try to come back again and then ask for greater density as far as on a hardship case on trying to pay for all these improvements? What's the rationale behind it? It makes no sense. It doesn't fit in the area. It doesn't make financial sense. The county and staff spent a great deal of time 7 years ago granting this rezoning from agricultural to R1A. The developer at that time, the applicant I should say, got their wish with the contingencies that were part of the development order. Now here they are trying to come back and ask for a reconsideration on lowering the standards that the county agreed to 7 years ago. My statement is they agreed to it. Don't change what was agreed to, and don't let them come back after another attempt as far as trying to get it lowered again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Barker. Following her, we have Cindy Holler. Get ready to come up.
Linda Barker, 3405 South Mellonville Avenue. What Mr. Spolsky said is absolutely imperative. The contingencies must be honored. That's why concessions are made. You give up something, the county gives up something, they need something in return. I think the question is not rezoning, it's all about the road. The main access is from East Lake Mary Boulevard. Extending access to Pine Way brings a volume of traffic the length of Sipes, causing more, can't read my own writing. Anyhow, you're going to have increased traffic down there. I live on a road that's 0.8 of a mile, Mellonville, between East Lake Mary Boulevard and Airport Boulevard. We had a traffic study done on that little stretch. 87 percentile exceeds 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And it's very disturbing to live on a county road where we can't get stop signs, we can't get traffic calming, et cetera, et cetera. Also, bottom line is, I disapprove of what they're asking for. I approve of what staff is recommending. Also, the people who live over on Pine Way, they were promised when those other developments were put in Kensington, there would be no access to Pine Way. You need to preserve Pine Way in that rural atmosphere and keep everything north of there. So there's no reason to come all the way down Sipes to access Pine Way. Everything needs to come from East Lake Mary Boulevard and directly from Sipes into the northern part of the development. There needs to be sidewalks on that Sipes. Anyhow, if you extend it all the way down to Pine Way, you're going to end up with a lot of traffic issues on a currently unimproved road. You're going to end up having traffic lights in there. Anyhow, bottom line, they need to abide of what they originally agreed to. And thank you all very much. I realize you all have been very late, and part of me coming here to speak out, if there's anything that I say that helps you all make a decision, anything that makes sense, that's what I want to assist as a citizen, as opposed to you have no input from the community. So thank you all for your time, and Chairman.
Ms. Holler.
Cindy Holler, 1731 Beacon Drive, Sanford. Originally, I wasn't going to speak on this item. I really just came to talk about the fees and support them. But when I looked at this, I said, oh, wow, so another rezone in Jay Zembauer's district, how about that? Of course, I don't like the density. I understand it was already approved in 2014. I want to see Sipes Avenue improved. So I agree with what staff has recommended. I recently saw an article, it's very interesting, that Seminole County Commission was getting a little concerned about clear cutting. I'm not for clear cutting. So it would be nice if future developments could start working around the bigger trees and not just clear cut everything. Florida-friendly landscaping and native, because we have water resources that we need to preserve. I'd like to see it on this development and future developments 100%. Wildlife signs for all displaced wildlife, and that's just a shame what we're doing to the county. But anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, do we have anyone online?
I have no raised hands.
Oh, that's a shame.
And as I said that, I do have a hand that is raised.
Okay, who we got?
Mr. Humphreys, he will need to unmute himself.
Yes, hi again. Joe Humphreys, 883 Cardinal Point Cove, Sanford, Florida. Again, as someone who lives in a rural or semi-rural area, when I first moved to Florida, to Sanibel and Captiva Islands, going back to previous comments, we didn't move there because we wanted to be close to a 7-Eleven. In fact, there are no 7-Elevens on, at least when I left anyway. What you've heard today from these people that live in this area is the angst that spreads from one end of this county to the other. We're all very concerned about property rights for everyone. That includes those of us who have been here for a while, and in some cases, a couple of 3 generations. I hear constantly about trend of development. Who establishes the trend of development? Planning and zoning, development staff, the Board of Commissioners. At some point, there's also a thing called government accountability. Okay, this area I've been coming to for many years, long before I moved here. I went through the whole debate in Tallahassee as a lobbyist over the Wekiva Parkway, and I understand that former Governor Martinez, recognized as a Republican, Governor Bush, who had a close working relationship, discovered and supported the protection of this area as a Republican. People moved here for a reason. Okay, I moved to where I live in Seminole County not because I needed to be close to shopping and so on and so forth, not because I lived on a 4-lane highway. In fact, according to county codes, my road is limited to 2 lanes. So all I'm suggesting to you is, again, if the county's made plans, at some point the county has to live up to its accountability. They made a deal several years ago, and this board, this committee needs to hear the angst that you hear on a regular basis from people that move to this county for a reason. We understand change. Again, I invest in change. I invest in change every day. I'm in the markets every day. I understand COVID. I'm investing for COVID, both before, during, and after. But what I'm asking this board, as fellow citizens like myself who serves on county committees, to listen to the people that are coming before you. They have property rights. Please, I urge you to follow them, listen to them, and vote accordingly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, we'll close public comment. Mr. Coover, would you like a chance to rebut?
I certainly respect the neighbors' concerns. I live a half a mile to the east. I've been there for 30 years. I have a school with 750 kids going to be there this fall. I understand development, but I don't own that property, and so the school's being built there. I'm just going to try and address a couple points. One is the staff report tells you that it's compatible. When this was approved in 2014, there was nothing out there like there is today. All the developments have started and been built out. there is a trend, that area is being developed for low-density, single-family residential. That's the way it is. That's the area of the city and the county that's being developed. It can't be developed on the east side of the airport because of the noise issues. You know it's developing north of 46 also, big developments over there. The old orange groves are all being developed. I understand the rural character that we have out there. I want to reiterate that we asked to improve the road in a different direction because it's impossible to do for a private person on Sipes because we don't have the power of condemnation, so we can't force people to sell us right away. So we can't do it that way, which is what I referred to earlier when I said the original applicant from 2014 walked away because Sipes is a constrained road. So that's why we asked for what we did. It's really the only option that we have, and we're working with staff on that, although I believe we're not there yet. I think the most important thing is that staff has found that this is compatible. We asked for a couple of changes. If you don't feel that they're appropriate, then that would be your decision. With respect to some of the comments, with respect to the animals, that's not really your lane. This is a rezoning, it's not a determination that's coming down the road. The drainage problems, nothing on that street is developed, so if there's drainage problems, I think they need to get the county to fix the drainage problem. It's not due to development to the north because Sipes doesn't have any development on it. It's all rural currently, has been. The number of homes that we're requesting is within the zoning. We're not asking for any more, any less. So I understand that having homes built causes angst. I have homes being built on my street too. There's a little bit more traffic, but this is a rural area, and I walk these roads 4 or 5 times a week and ride my bike on it, and if I see 3 or 4 cars between my house and Sanford Avenue and back, that's a busy day. There are very few cars that are back there. The traffic's up on Lake Mary Boulevard. It's not a problem yet, or I wouldn't be riding my bike without a helmet on, which I do. I choose to ride back there because it's still rural. I understand the neighbors' concerns. I understand they don't want to see that area developed. However, it's coming, and we would ask for your support. Thank you.
Steve, I've
Yes,
got a
sir.
question. So what is the reason, other than marketability, I'm guessing, to go from 2,100 to 1,500?
That is outside my wheelhouse. I know that we've had some discussions with some of the county commissioners, and they've asked for it to be increased slightly, and I think we're going to do that ultimately, but I can't tell you right now that I can agree to go up, but I think that's going to happen, and it could come from you. I don't know where it's going to come from, but...
You're not changing the lot size, so you're leaving them at 9,000 square feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just my clients had asked to reduce the home size, and I don't get involved in that part of their business, so I don't know the logic behind all that, but sure it has to do with floor plans and things.
Okay, thank you.
So I have one question for you. So the original approval is already on the books. The biggest thing you want to change is Sipes versus Pine? Because you're okay with the 2,100 square feet. Your builder said he would come up?
My client, who's not the builder, has talked to some people at the county, and I think they understand they're going to have to come up some. The zoning is 1,100, and we've asked for 15. But I can't commit to anything other than what we've asked for right now. And if this board decides it should be different, then that's your decision. And we would, you know, we would be satisfied with whatever you think is reasonable. I think our main concern is that we get approved. And if we get approved with staff's recommendation, you know, we would be happy with that. Because I understand that there's still some work to do.
Thank you.
Or discussion or a motion?
I actually have a couple questions for staff.
Go ahead.
Well,
Thank you.
if I could, if you guys would give me some time, I'd like to kind of clarify Public Works' position on the roadways.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to ask you.
Okay, good. So from the original approval back in 2014, it was to take the access up Sipes, and then, of course, they had the requirement to widen the road to 20 feet, and then, of course, they would have to obtain right-of-way in order to make that connection up to Lake Mary Boulevard, which would be the normal direction that we would expect for traffic. Now, the reason that Public Works is not supporting the change to go to Pine Way is because we currently still have that same problem with adequate right-of-way in order for them to improve Pine Way to 20-foot width all the way down to Brisson to take that access. Now, originally when it was presented to us, it was indicated that the right-of-way was there, and they were going to purchase additional right-of-way down by Brisson to make the full right-of-way width, and we have subsequently found out that that is not the case. So we are currently, Public Works is currently doing some title search and in-house title search, and also looking at any areas that could be maintained, or that not could be maintained, that are being maintained, that would be right-of-way and would be available for improvements, but we're just not to that point yet. We don't have that information available right now. So that's the reasoning that we're not for going down Pine Way, is because that has a right-of-way constraint also. So both directions have a right-of-way constraint, and we don't want to approve something to a different road section that currently has a right-of-way constraint also.
Chairman? So basically what you're telling me is no matter which way they go, whether they go Pine Way or they go Snipes, that they can't get the right-of-way to improve the road?
Potentially, that is correct. I mean, I can't say right now that Sipes doesn't have enough right-of-way to improve the road. We're just in the process of making that determination. And I can't say that for Pine Way either, because we're still having to determine whether there's right-of-way in either direction, and we're doing it for both corridors.
Okay,
so we're going to look at both corridors presently.
If the county, which has an easier time acquiring right-of-way, if the county acquired the right-of-way, could then the developer go ahead and make the improvements on either right-of-way if the county acquired the land to which they could make their improvements?
Well, the county would not acquire the right-of-way for the developer. So that's something that would be bore by the developer to ensure that that they've got the right-of-way available to make the improvements to support the development for the roadway.
Is at some point the county going to have to improve those roads? If there was no development, you know, or if there was a development, is the county going to have to improve the roads at some point?
Well, I don't think the county would improve them other than in their current state and within the right-of-way that's available.
So they're not on any transportation?
Yeah, and not on any capital improvement plan right now. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't be done in the future. I mean, if the county certainly could, but currently, I don't think we don't. It's not under the capital improvement plan, and I don't think we have any view of doing that in the near future.
So what exactly, if you could explain to me, what exactly is the difference between Sipes as it stands now and Pine Way as it stands now? What are the difference in the two roads?
Well, both of them are substandard, so neither of them are 20 foot in width, which is our minimum.
Okay, so what is the difference if they use Sipes or if they use Pine Way?
None, as long as they've got the right-of-way to do the improvements.
So
I'm not, we're not necessarily, I mean, you could amend it that there was an option to do both, depending on which way they could get the right-of-way in order to improve the road. But we're, without knowing what that right-of-way is, we were not going to support a change.
But staff is recommending Sipes as over Pine Way. I'm just trying to understand why.
Well, because that's currently what the board approved. So it's not that we're recommending it, we're saying you're sticking with what the board has already approved.
Okay.
Which was to go up Sipes. And it is the likelier path to get for traffic. I mean, if you got a development there and you're trying to get to Lake Mary Boulevard, Sipes is the logical choice to go.
Commissioner Grumberdorf?
Yeah, and so I read all this, and I kind of live out towards this area, and I drove it the other day. And then I read what the staff's recommended, and then what the board approved in 2014. 2014 wasn't that long ago, so it's not like it's, ages ago. Okay. They made the huge concession out in this area, because this is a very rural area out there. They made a huge concession in 2014 to switch it from R1A. And apparently, this was a pretty long meeting that was held. And so they made these concessions. I think the staff is making a similar agreement, but they're going to the current standard, which is 1,100 square feet or 1,500 square feet. I think that if you're going to have houses out in this area, 2,100 square feet should be the minimum. I don't see where you would even approve anything less than that. You're going to put 100 houses inside that little area, and that road, if you've ever driven it, is narrow. They would have to make some major improvements, put 100 houses. That's how many cars a day? 100 houses.
So that'd be about, it's 9 to 10 trips per house, so, 9 to 1,000 trips.
So 1,000 trips up and down that road, it would be almost impossible to handle. So the improvement would have to be substantial. And I don't agree with the staff's proposal, because I don't think we should be reducing the square footage size. The houses that are out there aren't that small. Most of them are more than 2,100 square feet. So the property value would just be diminished on these people who own property out there. I have a hard time agreeing with this. There's a lot of development out there. There's a new development pretty much every week out there, but none of them, I don't think, at this size. And I don't know, I would have to say I don't agree with it.
Further discussion? Or a motion?
Did I hear somebody say we're not changing lot size?
That's correct.
That's correct.
They're staying at
Just the house.
9,000 feet.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
that's where the concessions are going to start coming in. Once they get to the county, they'll say, well, we're 1,100 square feet, why can't we have, 8 houses per acre now? And that's what they're going to try to contend with, because they're going to have to improve that road. And that's going to cost a lot of money for a developer to improve that road, if they can even improve that road.
That's what I'm hearing, is either way, it's not going to happen.
Well, going up Pine isn't even going to be an option, because they're going to turn out on Pine, they're going to turn around and come right back down Sipes, because that's the logical way to go to get to Blake Mary Boulevard. You put he's right, 2 school buses, you couldn't get 2 school buses on that
I
road.
think the problem is the county doesn't have enough easement to improve the road, so they would have to go house to house, am I correct, and actually acquire that easement?
Well, depending on what we've actually got out there, we'd have to determine that through that title work.
Okay,
And
so
to see-
you don't even know what you have really at this point, the county?
Not correct. That's what we're currently looking into for both corridors, to determine exactly what's there that we can, is there by either an OR book and page or deeded right of way. And then we're also looking into whether there's any maintained right of way that.
How long
would
do you
affect
think that process is going to take?
Well, I mean, we're currently working on it, so
Okay.
I imagine right now we're looking at the overlay portion of it.
Okay.
And there may be a situation where we have to go out and get some survey in order to come up with a plan. But the idea for Public Works is to look at it, overlay the two, and then eventually bring that to the board if there's any maintenance right-of-way that we're currently maintaining that we want to get it documented, that we would bring that to the board. But that's that process that we're under right now.
Until
Make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to continue this for a couple months until we can get staff to, I think the big question here is what road can they work on? Which one can they actually improve to get in and out of the property? And which one would be more viable to be able to work on? And I think, we got to be able to answer that question before we can move forward with the property.
Agreed.
Well, our Public Works' preference would be Sipes, because that's the more logical.
Well, I understand that, yeah.
Access point, but yes.
Yeah.
We don't know that we have it on Pine Way either.
Okay. I think that's a huge question that needs to be answered.
What's that
So I'd like to make a
Well,
motion.
the connecting road off of Pine, isn't that also a rural road, a smaller road?
Postponed in a month, 2 months.
Because it connects Pine, you would just go out Pine, and you'd have to turn onto another
that's
road
logical.
before you got
So
to
we
Lake Mary
move to,
Boulevard.
Well, that would be Brisson.
Brisson, yeah, right. I kinda-
Brisson, but
couldn't-
that one's kind of improved already. That's the one that goes up where the other subdivisions access.
That's right, okay, yep, that's exactly right. Okay, now I remember it. Yep.
Motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this until the August meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, seeing none, the motion carries. So we'll see you again in August. Okay, Mary, do you have anything for the board?
Just a quick announcement at your dais. There was a How Did We Grow survey. This is being put on by the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. They did the How Shall We Grow study back in 2014, which wasn't that long ago. And so they're following up with the survey. Those of you who are technically savvy, you can use the QR code on your cell phone to link to the survey. There's also a website and phone number on there. I encourage you all to take it and to share it with your friends and family, and take it as well. Thank you.
Okay. We will. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
very good. With that,
Madam Chair, just one more item. Just
Sorry.
point of clarification on the mobility fee ordinance.
Yes.
You were reviewing that not only as the Planning and Zoning Commission, but also as the local planning agency. And under 7.2 of duties and responsibilities, item subsection 10 reads, review proposed land development regulations and amendments thereto, and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners as to the consistency of the proposals with the Seminole County Comprehensive Plan. So was your motion for denial of the ordinance also including that it was inconsistent with the comprehensive plan? Do you want to take a separate motion for clarification on that?
And Madam Chairman, if I could add to that, just to provide some additional clarification.
It was to
on the
deny the
question.
ordinance, right?
Correct. That was your motion. But again, was the ordinance consistent with the comprehensive plan is the other part of the LPA duty when reviewing an ordinance.
Okay, I'm sorry, Rebecca.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. I guess just to clarify the question, is the mobility fee ordinance, does the Planning and Zoning Commission acting as the LPA find that to be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, or are you denying it just based on those specific issues that you were, had questions on? For example, the mobility fee, staff believes that it is consistent with our transportation element as well as our future land use element. And our future land use element is actually organized around the how shall we grow study. We have the countryside, the centers and corridors, we have conservation, and then we have the rural area, which is the countryside. And so the mobility fee actually follows that concept within the way that the future land use element and future land use map is organized. And then also within our transportation element, our urban area is within a TCA, a transportation concurrency exception area, and we still have transportation concurrency within the rural area. And once we adopted that TCA, the comp plan has policies, objectives and policies to encourage mobility. And so I guess the question is the ordinance itself, are you saying it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, or just those certain elements within the proposed fee schedule and methodology?
Do you want to clarify your motion?
I would say we did not find it inconsistent with the plan, just among many the stated issues that I had, but I don't find it inconsistent with the plan.
Okay.
So would it have been better for us to continue it with the modification or changing or answering of those questions? Would that have been a better motion?
It's going to go in front of the
No, not
commission
necessarily, but it just helps us moving forward.
Yeah.
So I don't think, so it sounds like you don't find the mobility fee in itself inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, but you just had some issues with the way that.
We have issues with
Correct.
yeah.
We've always
yeah.
been saying that.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you can make a motion to that effect, that would help
Yeah.
clarify the record.
Yeah. And thank you
Okay,
for
so
all your
then,
help tonight.
We need to make a
wanna
motion to that.
Make a motion to that effect?
You want to make a motion to clarify that?
Do you need a motion?
Yes.
Yes, that would be preferable.
Okay. I'm so tired. Make a motion that we recognize our vote. I don't know, someone help me out with the word.
Okay.
But we need,
Recommend the Board of County Commissioners deny the ordinance amending Chapter 120, Road Impact Fees of the Land Development Code to revise and refine the regulations to replace road impact fees with mobility fees, despite the finding that the mobility fee concept is consistent with the Land Development Code. Would something like that work?
yes.
Okay. Would you like to make that your
Yes.
motion? Because I'm not allowed to make them.
I would like to
Okay.
get a motion. No
Okay.
motion.
In that case, do we have a second?
I second.
Then do we
I will
have?
ask if the clerk understood the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Then all in favor?
Makes more sense.
Aye.
Aye.
Are you, so you're changing your vote, though?
With that, yes, with that clarification.
Okay.
Great.
Opposed?
Oh, he changed his vote?
With that
Right.
clarification.
With a
yes.
clarification, yes.
Okay.
I feel better about that one, too.
Then it
I
passes.
think it's more clear to me, because I'm agreeing with it. I just don't like a lot of the stuff that's in it.
Okay.
All right.
I agree.
Thank you so much for doing
glad
that
we
for us at the
clarified
end of the
that.
meeting.
Now
All
I'll
right,
sleep
guys.
better tonight.
With that, we really are done this time. Right?
Well, that was a good evening.